Hello and welcome to today's episode. This episode will be about the year 2008 in video games and what that brought to us. But before we do that, we'll do our regular routine of having our Relay of Gaming segment here and then touching base on some modern gaming news, as there's actually quite a bit here that I had jotted down that happened in this past week, as it was a bit of a busy week for a lot of things going on in the video game industry. And then after that, that's where we'll start tackling into the main meat of this podcast, which is again about the year 2008. We're in the thick of the seventh generation here, and there's a lot of great stuff that came out. And the PlayStation 3 also started coming out with some big hits, though it started off the generation a bit slow. But this was kind of an exciting time because I feel like this is where they were all firing on all cylinders. And this also goes for the handhelds as well, too. So it was definitely became a really great generation. That's one thing that I really liked about this generation was that all of the competitors in there, so the PlayStation 3, the Wii, the Xbox 360, the Nintendo DS, and the PlayStation Portable were all very competitive, alongside with the PC as well too. As even though I didn't mess around with PC gaming back then, I do recall that there was a lot of good stuff coming out there during this time. So yeah, definitely a good time to be a gamer. A lot of online stuff coming out too, also that people have a lot of fun memories of. So all in all, overall, really good. But let's get in here into Relay of Gaming. And so I got these ones picked out already here. As again, I'm just sort of splitting up the way I do this podcast. And so sometimes when I record this, I'm not always in my little office, right, where I do the bulk of my recording. Sometimes I split this up as I'm driving to work and so forth. But so the games that I had, so starting off with the first game that I had selected, though, is for Devil May Cry 4. So speaking of 2008, it's funny, this has happened a few times already, and where it's a game. I select the game at random because I chose these earlier this morning, and then just put it up on my list as I'm driving, and where it's a game that came out on the year that I'm about to talk about, or at least within or the next year, so right, so kind of perfect timing. But yeah, Devil May Cry 4 came out in 2008. And it came out on the PlayStation 3 and then also the Xbox 360 this time too. So the Xbox 360 was starting to pick up some steam, right? And there were several games that were once considered like PlayStation exclusives that were going over to the 360 as well. And so this was one of them here. And I recall at the time it felt kind of like a big deal. But the thing though is that, and I can say this about a handful of games, even though they went to the Xbox 360, they weren't maybe the best of that particular franchise, right? And so Devil May Cry, just Devil May Cry overall, it's kind of I have a bit of a weird sort of, my appreciation for this series is that the first one I really enjoyed. The second one, it's a bit bland, but it's okay. It's not. I think it gets hated a little bit too much, but I also think it is probably one of the weaker ones in the series. And then Devil May Cry 3, Dante's Awakening is excellent. That's actually one of my more favorite ones too, also in the series. And then we come to this one here, Devil May Cry 4. And so it definitely went back to a style of like playing like Devil May Cry 1 and 3. But and I haven't played this game for a while, but I beat it back then. And there's a few things though that I can say on it. One is that the graphics were pretty impressive. I've talked about a lot about this generation struggled with hitting 60 frames per second, but this one didn't, at least not in the actual gameplay. And so it looks, it runs really well. And overall, it plays pretty well. But there's a few things, though, that kind of threw me off on this one. I think the initial setup of the game is interesting, where basically Dante is a bad guy from what it looks like. And you play this other character, Nero. And the gameplay is okay, but the character Nero, he's cool, I guess, and all, and his arm power that he has is kind of cool, and it's a bit different the way he uses his sword and all. I just don't feel that he has quite the personality of Dante to carry this game as the main character, especially when Dante is in the game. And I can appreciate for the twist that they were trying to do with the story, but I don't know, I just feel like it doesn't quite, pay out as well at the sacrifice of not having Dante as your main character. And the other thing too, also without spoiling too much, but basically you kind of play the game twice in a sense, And so while there is some variety in that, I don't know. I feel like it felt just like a way to sort of pad the game for extra runtime. And for me personally, it kind of suffered because of that. But the gameplay is, like I said, it's still not bad, and it looks pretty nice and has some cool music and all. But I don't know, definitely amongst one of my lesser favorite Devil May Cry games, and which was a bit of a shame because I was really looking forward to this as the Devil May Cry game into the new generation at the time. But it was a bit of a letdown, and so I've talked about it before, where this is where I think that a lot of people were realizing that the games developed in Japan during the stretch here in the seventh generation just weren't hitting as well as they used to. And so a lot of Western developers ended up taking off. I mean, it got to the point where, like, for example, Devil May Cry, it ended up getting sent over to a Western studio to develop the next game in the series, which was DMC, and as Ninja Theory developed that one. And there's controversies as far as like if that game was any good and all, but the thought at the time was, at least it seems like, that some Eastern developers were, you know what, let's just send it over to American developers because it seems like, or Western developers, I should say, and as they just felt like they just had a better handle of how to program games during this generation, which is unfortunate, right? And not because, I mean, you had a really great framework with Devil May Cry. All you had to do was just expand on that, and which they kind of did in this version here. It's just that the direction that they took was just kind of weird. But either way, though, I mean, like I said, it's not a bad game, and I would say definitely if you're wanting to go through the Devil May Cry series, I mean, certainly play it, right? And if anything, I mean, it has a cool little intro and cool music. But yeah, definitely among the one of the weaker ones here on the for this series here. But it was still kind of interesting though, right? And all that the Xbox 360 got this version as well too. But the next game I had selected here is for Advance Wars Dual Strike. I'm not familiar with this game here, and honestly, with a good chunk of the Nintendo DS library, it's a bit of a blind spot for me. I mentioned before, I owned the DS, and I just only had a very small handful of games for it. Like I think I had the new Super Mario World, and then the Castlevania games, and that was really it. Oh, and the Trauma Center. And I think I picked up like a small handful, but nothing really that I really got invested into the library of the system. And so, Advance Wars Dual Strike. I know this series is pretty popular. Well, it became popular on the Game Boy Advance and then on the DS, but not too familiar with it. I played a Game Boy Advance one a little bit, so that's about the extent of how much I know of the series. But basically, what I mean as far as actual personal experience, but I do know that it's like a military tactical shooter, or I'm sorry, a strategy game, and only it's done in this very almost kind of cutesy anime style. And so I do think that has a lot of charm to it. And the little bit that I played as a Game Boy Advance one, I mean, it definitely seems interesting, kind of like a Shining Force, but with you know tanks and such. But I'd be curious to play this one because of I'm sure it'll utilize the second screen to some extent, and so I feel like that could give it some interesting game mechanics on a strategy game like this one. So I'll be curious to capture footage on this and research a little bit of information to put it up on my YouTube shorts, and so that way I have some more familiarity with this game. But is this? I mean, is this really like a popular series? I mean, it seems like it is, but I don't really hear people talking about it though. This and Fire Emblem. I mean, which one would if anybody's familiar with these series, which one would you say is a more popular one? Not sure. But the next one I got here is for Dark Souls. And Dark Souls, I've talked about this game before on my channel, but I wasn't doing my shorts on the at the time, so I'll go ahead and just do it here. But Dark Souls, so not the game that started it all for these Souls-like games. Well, that was pretty much started with From Software, but definitely the one I would say that really started making it mainstream as Demon Souls before it. I mean, it seemed to be pretty beloved, but I don't think it quite hit as big as Dark Souls did. At least not from what I see or hear, but I could be wrong on that. But Dark Souls, I mean, I've tried to get into this game, and I've mentioned it before, right? And all Souls games I haven't completely written them off because there's a lot that I love about them. Like I love the aesthetics, I love the lore, I love how they are heavily inspired by Berserk, but I just have a hard time like understanding the difficulty to these games. Like I can appreciate difficult games to an extent, but I think my appreciation for difficult games is more like on a 2D platformer. That's what I like. I do like having a bit of a challenge in those kind of games. So, for example, I've been kind of getting into Cuphead more recently, and I'll talk more about that later. And so I'm loving the challenge on that. But something about like Dark Souls though, where I don't know what it is, but I have a hard time like learning enemy patterns in this game and all. And then the way it's set up, where you die, and then you got to go back and try to find where you died, and and that kind of stuff. And I have a hard time with, I guess, understanding how the difficulty works in this game or in these kind of games. And so that's why I've just been kind of putting them off some. I still have some interest in Elden Ring and Bloodborne are the one that really have my attention. But for this one here, Dark Souls, I played a ways into it, and I don't know, maybe like about an hour and a half or two or so, and where I was in the first castle area and got a little ways up into that castle. But I don't know. Like I said, I just have a hard time with these games, and I know that they're really beloved, and I know that there's a big fan base out there for them, and I think that's cool. But for me personally, like I said, I haven't quite written them off yet, but there's only so much patience and time that I have to try to really learn these games to, as they say, get good. And I feel like these are the kind of games that if you like a challenge and you're going to really dedicate a lot of time to this game, because it does take some engagement into it, right? And all, because not only learning the mechanics, but just learning, the level layouts and the lore and all that to really get absorbed into it. It's almost like you have to kind of make this your game for a while. And if you get it, and if you get into it, then yeah, it's awesome for that. And I do like that. Like I said, I love the concept of it, but I don't know. Maybe one of these days I'll just kind of break through and finally grasp the game and play through it. That's happened a handful of times with video games where I just don't quite get it at first, and then finally something clicks. And it could be maybe like I just beat a certain boss or figured a certain game mechanic out or something, and then I end up really loving it. Maybe that'll happen at some point with these games, but it just quite hasn't happened yet. And I've put some time into some of these games, and it just doesn't quite click yet. So but either way, though, I can't deny, though, that the popularity of this game has really soared within the past decade and a half, roughly or so, and really, created its own sort of genre, right, with Souls-like games, where so many games tried to mimic what these games were doing. And this is the first one in the Dark Souls series, and I believe, well, this and Part 3 are the ones that seems to get a lot of love. But yeah, either way, though, while not personally something that I'm hugely invested in now, I can understand why they're so popular, though. But that's what I got for the 3 games here for Roleway of Gaming. So let's start getting into the modern gaming stuff. So I have quite a bit of stuff here that I jotted down. I was trying to keep up with as much of it as I could. So some of these things that I'm going to mention here, like I said before, they're kind of ongoing stories, and so, like I said, I only do this once a week or so, where I make my little podcast here. So if I'm a bit outdated on some of this stuff, or if it's an ongoing story and I don't have completely everything correctly, I do apologize. So again, just to reiterate, while I do try to get my facts right as much as possible, some of this stuff is just like I'm just watching like a video or two, as I'm going throughout my week. As I do love watching like video game related stuff, but I'm just kind of like jotting things down really quick, literally, as I'm running errands, or just watching some videos on, while I'm hanging out with my family and all. And so I just jot down some quick notes. So again, if I get some of this information wrong and all, I do apologize. But as I've mentioned before, my podcast, I would hope you would just kind of look at it like you're just talking to a friend about like casual video game conversations. So not necessarily like it's, like a news, like I'm a news podcast of some sort. That's definitely not what I am. But still, I just love talking about this stuff, and also figured I'd still pass along this information here. But before I get actually into the news here, though, so like I mentioned earlier, I've started getting into Cuphead, and the reason why has been because of my daughter, actually. But a little while ago, I think she saw me play it, and so she thought that the characters looked kind of cute. And so from about a year ago or so, she's liked watching me play, and she would try to play it. But yeah, she gets killed in the game pretty easily, but she still really enjoyed watching the characters and all. But fairly recently, we started playing it again for some reason. And yeah, actually within this past week, I believe. I think I just picked up the game and just started playing it, and all. And she got into it, and then she wanted to play 2-player. And so then now, almost every night, it's like the first thing she says after I pick her up from school. She's like, "Hey, can we play Cuphead?" And so I'm like, you just give me a moment, because Cuphead, like I mentioned earlier, I do like a challenging game, but it's something that I have to sort of like prep myself for. Like, okay, I'm gonna, play this very difficult game after I've just had kind of a long day at work and all. And sometimes that is a good stress reliever, but sometimes not always. And so, but we've actually been having some fun though, playing this game this week. And so she's been kind of like my little cheerleader to sort of keep trying to go through the game, because it's funny because she'll get killed pretty easily in the game. I mean, the game is very difficult, right, and all, but then she just kind of cheers me on to want to try to, because she loves seeing me beat the bosses, or just loves seeing the boss designs. So I've gone a little ways actually into it this past week, as the farthest I've ever been in the game, and so I've beaten several bosses now. But I think it said like I'm like at 43% done, and so like I just beat this one boss that was. It was funny because she wanted to watch like what all the bosses are. I was like, okay, I'm going to put on a video for you. I was like, but I don't want to watch it. I'm trying to beat this game on my own. And so there was a video on, I just Google like top 10 hardest bosses, and there was a Watch Mojo video that came up. And so she was watching that. I was just kind of glancing at it. I was like, okay, I don't want to see how you beat it, no. And but out of the bosses that were on there, I think we beat like 3 of them. And one of the ones that we just beat was this kind of like a clown-looking thing on a roller coaster sort of area. And so that boss took me a bit to beat, but finally beat him. And so now we're on this dinosaur, or like a dragon boss that's kind of like there's like a castle in the back and you're jumping on all these clouds. And I just try to like twice. I'm like, oh, okay, this is going to be, I need to really like focus on this one. And it was getting kind of late yesterday. but yeah, so it's funny because she wants to see the ending so bad. I'm like, I was like, it's gonna be a little bit until I actually beat this game, because this is gonna be a tough one. But I've been having a lot of fun with it though, and all, and she likes watching it, so it's kind of cute as she's been sort of cheering me on playing this game. But yeah, Cuphead, yeah, great game. I mean, just the game itself and all. I mean, the art style on it, like my God, it's gorgeous 2D art, very original as well too. And I mean, it's got that run and gun gameplay that reminds me kind of like a cross between like Gunstar Heroes and Mega Man to an extent, which is, not bad company to be in. And yeah, Cuphead, great game. I mean, I love this game. I absolutely love it. And it might end up cracking my top 100. I want to beat the game before I even consider that, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. As one of my more favorite. I mean, it's kind of like a run and gun game, but it's also like a boss rush game. I mean, that's really the majority of the game is this boss rush. As I mean, you do have some run and gun sections, but there's not a whole lot of them though, and the bulk of the game is in these bosses here. But yeah, it's a lot of fun though. I can't definitely deny that though. But on a bit of a more sad news though. So just in general, there was a lot of people like celebrities and such that passed within the past week or two or so. But 2 that I noticed here from at least within the video game space. So there was Hideki Sato, and so he is kind of known to be the father of Sega's hardware. So as far as like he's been basically one of the main developers or programmers of like pretty much a lot of the main Sega consoles, like everything from the SG-100 is it 100 or 1000? I forgot. To the Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, Sega Saturn, and the Sega Dreamcast. And I think at one point I read that he was a president of Sega for a small stretch there. Well, anyways, he was a big figure when it comes to Sega, and sounds like he was there for pretty much all of their prominent years, and had a hand in developing a lot of all the cool consoles that they had. Because I mean, say what you will about Sega, but they did have some cool consoles. Again, for anybody that is new, like, oh, it's new. I'm sorry, that's not the right term. So, like, anybody that is younger, right? Like, let's say you were born in 2000, right? And you're an adult now, so you would be what, 26 now. But you're an adult. You've been playing games. You've been playing video games for a bit now, but even if you've gone back to the retro games, like going back to like the 16-bit days and all, or even the 5th generation days, you still weren't around when Sega was a thing. And so maybe you studied up on that and all, and that's cool. I always love seeing when younger people like go back and study like retro games and all, or really anything retro in general. But I will say that, it was Sega had a presence You know, I mean, right now, like, and if you're someone that is on the younger end and you know only Sega from like the Atlas games or Yakuza games or Sonic, there, I mean, Sega was a thing. It was a whole thing, you know, and all, and they had their consoles and everything, and they were really well beloved for a big fan base there. The sales numbers don't always speak the full story, right? I mean, obviously, like the Saturn and the Dreamcast, they didn't sell incredibly a lot, right? But I will say that the people that had those systems were very passionate, and with their systems, at least for the most part. And and then the impact that the Sega Genesis had, I mean, that was huge back then. And so it's just kind of sad because Sega's definitely not the Sega from before. But I mean, they were up there with like on par with like Nintendo at one point, right? I mean, the console wars of the Genesis and the Super Nintendo was that was a thing, for example, and Sega really made a name for themselves. And it sounds like Hideki Sato, he was a big reason for that on why Sega had a presence in the video game space, for many years there. So, I mean, he pretty much created a lot of my childhood. So for that, I appreciate it. Rest in peace, and thank you for all that you did. You definitely left me with a lot of fun memories. Someone else that passed as well too was Shitaro Ida. I believe that's how you say his last name. And so I didn't know of him, but he was a programmer for, I mean, a lot of the Castlevania games from like, it seems kind of like the 2D Metroidvania Castlevania games. He also was one of the major developers for Bloodstained and also Metal Gear Solid 5. I believe I saw that he was like created, he had a hand in developing in that game as well too. So he sounds like a very talented developer. And so unfortunately he passed as well too. Looks like so he lived 1974 to 2026. And yeah, I mean, I didn't know of his work, until recently, but he was definitely behind a lot of things that I'm a huge fan of. So, rest in peace also. Oh, and for Hideki Sato also, so he lived from 1950 to 2026. So yeah, rest in peace, gentlemen. But, on a more lighter note, though, we did get some fun updates, though, for Nintendo Switch 2 products, or games, I should say. And so one of them starting with Assassin's Creed Shadows. So that had some kind of a visual update of some sort. I kept seeing something about how it improved the water effects on it. So there's that. So it seems like that game is running closer to what it is on the other consoles, like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X and PC. So pretty impressive. I mean, that I consider the Switch 2, like, as far as the specs goes, like maybe like on the higher end of an 8th generation system, right? And so the fact that it's producing visuals like that is pretty impressive. But the other ones that kind of came out of nowhere too, also, where for first there was Skyrim that it got a 60 frames per second patch. I messed around a little bit with that, and yeah, finally, I have Skyrim the way I've been wanting to play it, and where I can comfortably play it portably, right, without relying on the cloud and all. And so, because I have this game on the Steam Deck, but whenever I play this game on the Steam Deck, it gets really loud, and so sometimes I'm like, like if I'm playing something handheld, I need it to be a little quiet, just because I'm trying to either get my kid to sleep or I'm next to my wife. And I don't want it to be like super loud, and the thing sounds like a jet engine. But on the Switch 2, it's really quiet, runs beautifully now, and so pretty happy with that now. So finally, I feel like I'm going to be able to make my way through Skyrim now, as that's been one of the things holding me back. Is just that some games I just make a lot more progress on them when I can play them portably, and so yeah, pretty happy about that. A little weird that we had to wait a few months till I got to this, but again, I'm not a video game developer, so. However that all works, whatever, I mean, it's not, I'm a fan of like having to wait for patches and all that, but we're here at least, and so that's cool. But the other one too, also, they got shadow dropped just out of nowhere, was for Xenoblade Chronicles X. And so there was a Switch 2 edition that came out, and so for the game that came out last year on the Switch, which originally came out on the Wii U back in, I forgot what year, but some years ago. And yeah, so I've been wanting to play these Xenoblade games, and so then when I saw this announced, I was like, oh sweet! So I went in there and I paid the $5 for it to get it upgraded. I was like, all right, that's fairly cheap enough. And so I've been playing through it, and yeah, I mean, it looks great. The 60 frames per second really shines in this game here, and it looks truly amazing. And I'm getting further, and so I played it for a bit yesterday, and actually got a lot, because I've played it up to I played the game some, and I really liked it, but I just kind of kept holding back on it, as I was kind of like, this is a pretty chunky game, so I need to I need to find some time to try to play this. But after that patch came out, I was like, well, let me check it out, and so then I picked up on my save file and started playing through it more, and I was like, oh wow, this looks really impressive, and so then I actually played it for a few hours yesterday, and I was pretty impressed with it overall. That I think that I think that I might have this and Skyrim as sort of like my main games that I'm going to be playing, because they're games that Skyrim is a game that, yes, it has its story, but a big part of the game though is the journey, the side quests, and all that you're doing. And from what it sounds like, Xenoblade Chronicles X is kind of like a JRPG version of that. And at least from what I've read in reviews and all, that it's one of the Xenoblade games that, well, it has a decent story. It's not like it's fully fleshed out like the way the other Xenoblade games are. And so because of that, I think I'm going to have like these two games in rotation, where I'm just kind of slowly working my way through them, but consistently, as they just seem like, really incredible worlds to get lost in and all. And like I said, with the patches now on these, that I can play them portably now, in a very easy form factor. I love it. Great. Although I will say that for Xenoblade Chronicles, it looks nice at the 60 frames per second for sure. Something about it looks really like shiny though, and like when I was playing it on my big screen TV, I mean, it looked nice. It did look a little shiny, portably also as well too. So I don't know. Maybe they might have overdone I don't know. I guess the resolution or the shine. I don't know how that all works, but either way, though, I mean, it still looks pretty cool though. And it's definitely a smooth playing experience for the most part. I don't have a way of counting like the frames per second, but I mean, to the eye, it looks like I would assume it's a mostly consistent 60 frames per second. I don't doubt that there's probably drops here and there, but for the most part, it looks pretty incredible though, at least to my eyes anyways. Let's see, but we did also get, looks like I think it comes out in March or so. I didn't quite catch the date, but I saw this trailer that it was like so there's a Fatal Fury game that came out fairly recently. It's called like City of Wolves, I believe. And so it's the new Fatal Fury game and all looks pretty nice, and with the 3D graphics and all that, very modernized. But it's having some kind of a collaboration with Street Fighter though, as it looks like it's bringing some Street Fighter games over to Fatal Fury. And so that's kind of cool how they've been sort of doing that with between the both series. There's been some I believe I've seen like crossovers with Fatal Fury over to Street Fighter as well too, and so that's kind of cool. But it looks like there's something coming out for that fairly soon. The Virtual Boy, the Nintendo Switch Online app, got its update, and so the games have been released now. I think there's like 12 or 14 games, I believe, that you can play on there now. And I was curious to start checking it out, but the one thing that I wasn't quite sure on, because they didn't really announce it, was how this was going to be played. Like if you can play it without the virtual headset that Nintendo was going to be selling. And so, sure enough, you're not able to. You have to have the headset, and so that was a bit of a bummer there. And like I have these games emulated, right, that I can play without the Virtual Boy headset thing. But it looks like you have to use it to be able to play these games. So a bit of a bummer. And because the actual Virtual Boy headset thing that they came out with, that replica, from what I can tell, at least for the most part, it's similar to the one that they had back in the day. That one's like $100. And I'm not going to shell out money for that. But what I might invest in, I don't know, I have to think about it, but is there's like a cardboard version of it, where it's like a smaller thing, but it's made out of cardboard, but you still kind of the same thing. You put your Switch in there, and then you get the 3D effect, I guess. That one's for $25 or $24.99. So I may consider getting that one, just more of as a novelty, right? And also have a way to kind of experience what these games were all about back then. Because you can play it emulated and all, but obviously it's not giving you the full experience of what these games were about back then. I don't know. We'll see. I might consider. See though. Let's see. Getting into the next story here. I know my notes are kind of all over the place here, but Replace. So this is that sort of cyberpunk 2D style action adventure game. I'm not quite sure what exactly the gameplay is going to be, but it has me really interested in, as I just love the artwork to it and all. But it looks like it got delayed yet again. This time it was set to come out in March, but now it looks like it's being set to around mid-April. Looks like the reason for that is they're just trying to still polish up the game and all. So interesting, and all, and I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, looks like we still have to wait a little bit longer though. But something else though is so there was I just caught a little bit of the story here, but there was some kind of a convention of for Dice. So Dice, they are developers. I know, like they've done like the Battlefield games, I believe, and so or maybe they just have some kind of a convention, right? For basically, from what it sounds like developers and investors and account holders and all that stuff. And so, from what it sounds like during this conversation that they had during the Dice convention, that many developers or companies and all kept pointing or referencing Claire Obscure. And so from what it sounds like, they're talking to, as they're talking amongst each other, they're sort of like pointing at Claire Obscure, like, well, Claire Obscure was really successful and it only needed so many millions, right? And all to be developed, or, they were able to sell it at 50, or look at the success Claire Obscure had, something to that effect. And so, I mean, it sounds like Clair Obscur was very influential, right? It's been probably one of the more influential games, I would say, of the past, at least 5 years or so, where it wasn't like an online game, right? It was like a single player experience that had this much pull behind it. And I mean, because like everyone seems to be referencing it, not only because of the quality of the game, but also that, again, that it was a fairly cheap game to make, with a fairly small team, and that they were able to sell it at $50. And I mean, I think I saw that the last, roughly it sold like about 6 million copies. And so I don't know how much of a change Claire Obscure is really going to have as far as like the impact of how games should be sold. Like if developers are all of a sudden going to go back to a $50 price point. I mean, I kind of doubt that. But I think it's enough that it's been starting the conversation to at least to for that, right? To have that discussion. And, I mean, is it better to, sell, you know, several copies if you're selling it at cheaper, or maybe not as much copies if you're selling it like at $70 or $80? And also, how much money are you throwing behind your video game projects? Do you need to spend like, close to $1 billion, right? Just to get this, to get, develop a game? I mean, I think it's definitely conversations that should be had. I definitely feel like video games should be scaled back some, because it's just getting a little bit too ridiculous, right? Because another thing that I saw too, also, so kind of, matching it with this story to an extent, is so like if we're taking like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, right? As it looks like, like Final Fantasy probably more particular, that they've been having a hard time finding their audience. And so that could be for numerous different reasons, right? But one of the things though that I saw that it could be, and this had to be like, there was some kind of I saw a video where there was somebody on a Japanese forum or so asked that question, like, what do gamers, like new gamers, think about like Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy? Two very hardcore JRPG staples from back many years. And part of the reason could be that some, right, or like people can't get into, more specifically Final Fantasy, is that there just haven't, there's been a long wait in between releases. Like, so like when I was growing up, we had like, there was a stretch there from like the 90s to like the 2000s that there was almost a Final Fantasy game every year, like a mainline Final Fantasy game, and all of them were at least to a good extent incredible. And so then my early years were defined by that, right? That I could count that there was a really incredible Final Fantasy game coming one after the other. Nowadays, I mean, we did have Final Fantasy 16 in 2023, and then Rebirth of, like about half a year later, which was cool. But then between that, you know, before that we had what, Final Fantasy, well, remake, right? That was, 4 years prior to that, and then Final Fantasy 15, which was, in 2016. So there was a big gap there. And in 2000, and then Final Fantasy 17, who knows when that will come out. And so, and now obviously, right, times have changed where games are a lot difficult and more, there's just more to them to develop and program for. But I guess my point, what I'm getting at, is that kind of matching it to the Claire Obscure story, is that, is there a way to scale back games so they just don't take that, so long to develop and, to come out? And I understand Claire Obscure took a few years, so like I think 5 years or whatever, right, to come out eventually, from when it was first being conceptualized. But I think that, if we are able to scale back not only the budgets of some of these games, but then also that, maybe they can find ways to optimize the games quicker so that they can come out a little bit faster. Just because, again, there's just, and not only that, I mean, if a game comes out, it takes forever to come out. Like sometimes, there'll be only one game of a franchise in a generation, and then if that game flops, it like completely screws the company, right? And so, I mean, there's a lot of layers to that conversation there, and so I'm glad at the very least Clear Obscure is making those conversations happen, right? Um, And so yeah, so that was interesting there. But speaking of that, there, so I'll go ahead and tie it into this other story here because it just kind of came out yesterday, and so just seemingly out of nowhere, Sony basically canceled or closed Blue Point Studios. So if you don't know, Blue Point Studios, they were really talented developers that were mainly known for remaking games. So some of their or remastering them. So going back to like previous generations. So I could be wrong on some of this, but I think that they did like the God of War remasters for the PlayStation 3, and then also I don't know if they did like the Ratchet and Clank and Jack and Daxter. I'm not 100% sure on those there. But then they also did the let's see what else. Oh, the Uncharted Legacy Collection on the PlayStation 4, which is for as far as I can see, it's a really great collection. I mean, it runs really well, looks really nice, and all, and really improved that series there for me personally. Is that's the way that I prefer to play it. Then more recently they did Shadow of the Colossus, which on the PlayStation 4, which is a really nice looking remaster of the original PlayStation 2 game. And then also they did Demon Souls as well as a launch title for the PlayStation 5, which looks incredible. And so while their games might, take away certain little things here and there of the spirit of the original, but for the most part, I think that most people would agree that they're an amazing remake slash remaster studio. And so after Demon Souls, Sony purchased them, I think, in 2021. And so that was kind of exciting because it made sense, right? It's like, okay, well, maybe they're using them to remaster some games and all, which I know there's that whole discussion about we're getting too many remakes and remasters. But, at the very least, if it's someone like Blue Point behind it, usually the thought was like, hey, at least Blue Point is doing it and it's going to be a really good remake slash remaster. But it was always kind of up in the air on what they were going to do next. I think at one point I even heard that they were going to remaster or I'm sorry, remake the first Metal Gear Solid game. And I remember I was kind of excited about that. I was like, oh, damn, that'd be cool. I'll be curious to see that. Or also there was speculation that they might be doing their own thing. Because I mean, obviously they're a really talented developer that it seemed like they might have earned the right to create their own property, their own IP, right? And so Sony has had, emphasizing on past tense, reputation for taking developers and making them part of their first party camp, and then cranking out some really cool exclusives. So like Naughty Dog, Insomniac games, Sucker Punch, right? The Guerrilla games, to name a few. So it was thought that Blue Point might be on that level of pedigree, right? But we never, at least as far as I know, nobody really knew what they were working on for a long time. And but ultimately, I know that what I don't know is that a couple months ago it was revealed that there was so Sony has made this push, right, to try to do like a bunch of live service games within this generation, which is part of the reason why this generation for the Sony PlayStation just feels a bit flawed. And a lot of them ended up getting canceled. Well, one of the games that ended up getting canceled was a God of War live service game that was going to be set in the Greek mythology timeline. That doesn't sound like a good match. I mean, there was already that God of War Ascension game that came out on the PlayStation 3 that had a multiplayer component to it, and it didn't really seem to take off that well. So it doesn't seem like it'd be the most natural fit for a God of War game. Well, I don't know if they announced it back then, but they had certainly announced it now as I kept reading stories on, Blue Point's closure, and that's what they were working on, was this God of War live service game. Now, I don't know the full details of it, if they, put them to work on this game and then obviously they canceled it and then they closed the studio for that. Maybe there's other things going on there. Or maybe there's some smart business move that they're doing, like even though they're closing the studio, maybe they're reallocating these developers to another team or who knows what, right? I don't know the full story of it, but it seems like we've been noticing this pattern a lot where a big company buys up a studio, tries to get them to work on a live service game, and which is not really what they normally do. The game flops or it gets canceled, and then the developers get laid off. Like for example, like Rocksteady and the Suicide Squad game, Concord, is another example, and just kind of really, makes you think like, what is going on here? And so, I mean, a lot of this has been pinned on the CEO that was there for Sony at the time. What was his name? Jim Ryan, and then the new ones, Herbert something, I believe. I forgot his name. But it seems like this generation, Sony has just not been playing their cards right. I mean, the live service, it seems like just the money that these games can make, it's worth the risk for them to try to capitalize on that, even at the expense if they know that they'll probably shut down the studio and all, because it seems like it's like a gamble, right? You're gambling, and it's like, well, it seems like there's a lot of money there, and if it doesn't make money, oh well, But it's like that's horrible, right? From like on a if you're not like a CEO or anything, right? You're just a regular developer and all. It's like, oh well, there goes my job, right? And all because of the expense of not because of your talents, but because of just bad decisions being made at the corporate level. And there's been an ongoing, pattern that we've seen for the past 3, 4, 5 years now. And definitely makes you wonder what is going on with this industry. Everyone's chasing this live service, golden goose. And I don't know. It's it's just, and like I said, all of this here is why I'm just starting to bow out as far as like my interest in a lot of the newer stuff. I've said before, obviously, I'm still going to be getting some games. Like I'm really looking forward to Resident Evil Requiem that comes out next week and all. But I don't know, man. There's just so many things that it's just like, it's almost like maybe sounds kind of lame, but almost like ethically, I feel like it feels wrong almost to try to keep supporting this industry that it just seems very corrupt and very scummy now. And it's just, I mean, you're seeing this all across the board with a lot of different things. It's just, I've always been a big fan of video games, and it's just kind of sad to see it go down like this. And, I'm not saying there's going to be a crash or anything like that, but it just, I don't know. It's crashing with me, basically. I'm starting to, as the kids say nowadays, I'm starting to crash out on the video game industry now for just a lot of things that I'm seeing there. I mean, so much of this stuff is just, I don't know, just doesn't seem like cool stuff, and so kind of sad. Hopefully, this developers find a place to land on, or Blue Point, because they were really talented developers, and I'll miss seeing some of their remakes slash remasters. But such is the way it goes nowadays. Um, Todd Howard was on the Kind of Funny podcast talking about Elder Scrolls 6 a bit. So here's a game that was announced, I don't know, some years ago, and it's still in development, and probably won't come out for another several years. I mean, we had Skyrim, the last game in that series, back in 2011, and they just keep re-releasing it. And Skyrim is an incredible game, don't get me wrong, but again, these games just take forever to develop for, right? And then when they do come out, they just don't meet the overall expected quality. But anyways, he talked a little bit about it, said something about that they'll be using the Creation Engine 3, excuse me, which I believe like the Skyrim and Starfield. I could be wrong, but I think they use the Creation Engine 2. I'm not 100% sure on that. But also supposedly he mentioned that it'll be more of a classic RPG, like, well, I mean, in terms of like not changing up the systems that they had in Skyrim or Oblivion too much. So at the very least, it sounds like they're not changing the formula that much. So that's cool, I guess. But he also mentioned that development is going well, but it's still going to be a while. So I don't know. I probably wouldn't anticipate to see this game until 2029 or 2030, honestly. It's just because it gets to the point where it's like, are we even really interested in it anymore? Anyway, it's just an update that was done on that. But another update too, also. So this kind of came out of nowhere, and so I just saw the quick little trailer for it. But it's called My Mario, and apparently they're doing like a bunch of. So Nintendo's doing a bunch of different things here, where they're introducing like Nintendo products, Mario products to that seem kind of aimed more towards babies or toddlers. So you can get like almost like what seems like a board game or like a blocks and all that has like the Mario characters and all. And you can buy these at like some of the Nintendo stores, I think like the one in San Francisco. And there's also some kind of an app too also that came out that you can get for like tablets and such. So I don't know. I might download it for my daughters and see what it's all about. But I guess cool, right? Just another way for Nintendo to try to indoctrinate kids. And oh, that sounds horrible now given everything that's been coming out. But but if for what it is, though, I mean, it sounds kind of cool, I guess. But definitely not something for that. Again, that seems to be more catered for kids. I don't know. But let's see. So another thing came out too. So this was for So Christopher Judge, so he's the actor that does the Kratos voice in the newer God of War games, so the one from the Norse mythology, and it seemed like he was at some kind of a fan convention of some sort. Like, I'm not sure exactly where he was at. And so somebody asked him a question about, I forgot what, but ultimately he started spilling the beans on some of the things that are upcoming for God of War. So it's almost like saying like the quiet part out loud. And people are speculating that he'll probably get hit with an NDA, right? Like, hey, dude, like you can't talk about this stuff. And he might have, but it looks like he was being filmed, and maybe he did, or recorded, and he wasn't aware of it. But looks like he spilled the beans on some things. So the first thing is so the God of War remakes. So we've already kind of known, given the trailer that they showed, but TC Carson seems to be coming back to voice Kratos in those ones there. So that's cool. I'm glad that he's he got his job back doing that. And but it seems like they're doing like a whole new fighting game system, like a combat system in that one there. What does that mean? I don't know. Right? I mean, I was kind of hoping for these God of War games. What I was hoping for them is that they would, for parts 1 and 2, that they would pretty much just remake them like in the graphics of like the God of War 3, and then polish them up some, and get them to that level of, at least that level of video of graphical quality, because God of War 3 looks incredible, right? And but keep the same gameplay, maybe polish some things up here and there, right, and all, but for the most part keep it the same and call it good. But it is called remake. It's not remaster. And so if we're going off of what we know the term to be more of, a remaster is where you're just cleaning up the graphics but keeping more or less the same thing, right? Where a remake is you're completely, revamping the whole game structure. And so, I don't know. I don't know how I would feel if they try to do it like in the God of War newer games where it's like over the shoulder. I mean, one of the things that I love about the original games set in the Greek mythology was the hack and slash gameplay of it, right? Where the camera's pulled up. And so I don't know how I feel about that. We'll see, like I said, what comes out of it. But I hope that they don't like try to sanitize the game, or, or really mess with the combat system that much, because the God of War games are, they're really bloody. They have a lot of like, adult content on it to an extent, right? And all, I mean, Kratos is there, getting it on was one of the Greek maidens and all. And it's, I mean, I guess nowadays all of that can seem across as kind of like lewd and all. And then also, I guess, given the circumstances of the world nowadays, right, with a lot of things going on, that might come across as offensive now to more people than maybe it did back then when it came out. So maybe they're trying to sanitize their image because of that. I don't know. Uh, just I don't know. But I mean, but the whole point of the God of War games, right, is that it's very, it was very gory, very over the top, and all. And so I just hope that they don't sanitize it too much or mess with the gameplay too much. But that there has me a little worried there. But the other thing that he also mentioned was that there's going to be some kind of an announcement made of a new game that he's in that Cory Balrog is involved in. So Cory Balrog, so he was the director of the second God of War game in the Greek mythology and the first God of War game in the Norse mythology. So and as far as I know, he's been around helping out making these games to some extent anyways. And so he's been, outside of David Jaffe that created the game originally, Cory Balrog has seemed to have been a major player in the development of these games, right, for a long time there at Santa Monica Studios. So supposedly it's his new game. So it's kind of like, Christopher Judge is coming back to a Cory Balrog made game. Cory Balrog has been mainly known for God of War games. And then I think last year, I think it was Jason Schreier or something like that, they came out with some kind of a quote saying that the new game that Cory Balrog was doing, it's something about that it could be from like an existing IP, but it feels different enough, or something to that extent. All of that points that it's a new God of War game, but now set in a completely different timeline. There's been a lot of rumors that it could be in Egypt, which that would be interesting. I would be down for that. Like if there was a new God of War game, like we're going into a brand new, everything, but now in the Egyptian world. I mean, that's cool. You're taking on the sun god Ra and all that. That's, I was like, okay, okay. What are the other gods there? Anubis or fuck. I used to know a lot of this shit too. Also, now I forgot so much of this. But anyways, I know that Egypt has a lot of cool gods that you can probably take on and kill. All right, so that has me interested. Um, So we'll see what that's all about. So I guess we'll probably know more about it during the summer. But yeah. Oh shit! Can you imagine like if we get a announcement for the new God of War game along with Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 during the Summer Games Fest? That'd be pretty badass. But anyways, so yeah, so that's all cool and all. Um, but another story that has come out, and these are sort of like linked together, I guess. So I'm just gonna sort of lump them in here together. But it was that so the Steam Deck has been out of stock here in the United States, and also kept seeing headlines about that there's tough times potentially coming up for the Switch 2 and the PlayStation 5 to an extent, but more PlayStation 6, right? Which hasn't even been announced, right? But just assuming that there's going to be a PlayStation 6. How that's all linked together is basically because, so for example, the Steam Deck has been out of stock due to memory and storage shortages. And so, and then that also leads to the Steam machine, right? On why they haven't, officially announced its release date. And so a lot of it is just, again, like we've already talked about before, but it's this whole, the AI just taking up all these RAMs and storages. Uh, and it's just causing this big old, basically a shortage of just components, right? And all to make these systems that it's either causing them to delay when their next systems would come out or shortages on some of the systems that are already out, or also potentially could we be seeing a price increase on some of these systems here. Now, there's been a lot of speculation that Nintendo might end up increasing their price, but also at the same time, what we could see is that they don't increase their console price because it they're so young right now, the Switch 2, that it would seem a bit crazy to raise the price on it right now or here soon. But what you might start seeing, though, my guess would be like probably increase like in maybe game prices or like their subscription services, which all of them have to some extent. Like, there's a NSO or the PlayStation Network or Game Pass, right? For example, on all three major platforms. And so we could basically things are going to get more expensive to some extent is kind of what I figure to, whether if it's the consoles, the game prices and all. And a lot of it, again, just has to do with this shortage of RAMs and storages and computer components and all that. So AI, Skynet is really starting to ramp things up. And I mean, it'll be interesting how this all plays out. There's a lot of speculation that the AI bubble is going to burst at some point, but I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of like warehouses already being built. I know in the area that I live in, it was announced fairly recently that we're going to get some kind of a Amazon AI warehouse, something, something. And so there's already been some controversy behind that. And it just seems to be popping up everywhere. I mean, it seems like it's inevitable. And at the very least, right, it's definitely affecting some of our favorite electronics on how they're coming out or how they're being priced. And like, for example, the Steam machine, it sounds like they made the announcement of, the Steam machine and all that shortly prior to these major announcements of all the shortages of all these computer components. And so then they've been holding back like, oh crap, we got to wait now as, you know, we're trying to time it right, but also price it right too. And so that's just been causing a lot of controversy there. And so, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this all shapes out. And, because I don't know, the AI, this whole AI thing and all, it's not stopping from what it looks like. And we're all in it for the long term. I mean, you can go on one doom and gloom saying that we're gonna be in a future like Terminator here soon, or on the other end, right? Not that doom and gloom, but just also that it's just gonna be affecting just a lot of things like on a economic and social level, right? I mean, there's just so many things coming out about AI right across the whole spectrum of everything on how it's affecting people, like everything from like their jobs to like their mental health and to our video game consoles being outpriced. It's just it's crazy. And yeah, I obviously don't have much more insight other than just what I see on the news, but definitely we're in for some interesting times here in the next I would say like 3 to 4 years or 5 years, right, on where we end up being because of AI. I mean, the goal, from what it seems like, is for us to be able to cure cancer and where we don't have to work, our retirements, well, we don't have to worry about retirement because AI is going to take all care of it. Yeah, sure. It sounds like an utopia, but Honestly, that sounds more like mind control. Mind controlling the masses. That's a whole other topic there, though. But yeah, but that's what I got for modern gaming stuff here, though. And so we're in for some interesting times regarding video games. But I will say this though: now is as good a time as any to get into your backlogs, to get into retro gaming and all. A lot of, even if you can't get like the original consoles, there's a lot of amazing emulation devices out there that are built really well nowadays as far as like the sturdiness of them. I don't know like their life expectancy yet, but like between like what I have, like the RG28XX, for example, to the Steam Deck or the Odin 2. I mean, I have like tons of different ways of playing like a bunch of old games, and I'm set for life pretty much. And so that's why I'm personally I'm not too worried about it as far as like, are we still going to get cool new games and all? Because like I've said before, I'm pretty much not completely checked out on the new stuff, but I could like, you know, if no video games were made from here going forward, I'd be fine with it, right? Just because again, I got so much stuff to play now, and also from not only do I have a lot of stuff to play, they're also from a time where I felt that video game development was just better structured and organized and more passionate. But we'll see how it all goes. As long as it doesn't mess with my Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, I'm good. Actually, that wasn't all I had. As I was starting to get ready to edit my podcast here, there was a bunch of stories that broke out, and so wanted to touch base on some of this stuff here before I ended up uploading the podcast overall. But one story here that came out actually, this was a few days ago, but just finally noticed it here. But since I'm sort of trying to follow up on the development of Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, there was some interesting information that came out from Naoki Hamaguchi, as it looks like there's been a bit of a concern for the quality of Final Fantasy VII Part 3, like on what will it be since it's being now, ported over to the Xbox and the Switch too. And so the concern has been that if the overall quality is going to degrade because of that. Well, long story short, Hamaguchi had an interview with, I'm not entirely sure who, but basically he just kind of broke it down, stating that even though it's being ported over to other systems and all that are, let's say, weaker than, let's say, like the PS5, ultimately it's being developed for on a higher end PC, and then from there they go down, right, and all but being optimized for the particular console, so like PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch. So long story short, meaning that there's not going to be a degrade in quality overall, even though it's being ported to weaker systems, and which I think is kind of already kind of a given, I guess, in a way. But it's nice that he gave a breakdown on this. And in the interview that he gave, he really goes into detail of how it all works. I mean, he's talking about how the CPU is used, the GPU, and all kinds of stuff. So if you enjoy that sort of information, it might be worthwhile checking out the original interview that he had on that. So, and also he mentioned too that there's some kind of a news coming soon. Nothing really clarified as to when that might be, but good to know though that it's, again, I'm still thinking probably during the summertime, but it should be on its way though. But another story that broke out too also was this was regarding for Chrono Trigger. Now, everything is pointing that there is something coming. When, we don't know. What it's going to look like, we don't know yet for sure, but we have some more information, and it definitely seems like there's something in the works. So what I understand happened was that there was some kind of a survey that went out to Square account holders in Japan only, and and so this was for Team Asano. Apparently, did this survey, and so they're responsible for a lot of like HE 2D games. So, for example, like the Octopath Traveler games, I believe. And so in the survey, it just basically indicated like what kind of games would you want to see be remade, what kind of style, or what gameplay elements are you looking for, and things along those lines there. So some leaker, I think they said his name was like John Harker or something to that effect. He apparently leaked out part of what was questioned in the survey, and so then one of the things that kept coming up was that we want to see Chrono Trigger, and so apparently the response back to that was that, well, Chrono Trigger is already in the works, so do you got anything else? And so then somebody else asked, so you just kind of said the quiet part out loud, and doubling down on that, he said something. I guess the person that was saying this said something along the lines of, "It wouldn't be the first time." So again, I didn't quite catch like who said what or what and all, but that was more or less a conversation that was had during this apparent survey, back and forth that they were having. So I mean, that definitely seems like there's something going on there with Chrono Trigger, and so I mean, with everything coming out and with all the leaks that have been coming out on this and all, again, you know it's still not confirmed or anything like that, but I'm going to assume that there's definitely something there, and we'll probably get some kind of information about it. I would assume sometime later this year would be my guess. And I obviously don't have any inside information on that other than what I just see online. But where there's smoke, there's fire. There definitely seems to be something in the air. There's been so many leaks and rumors about it. The timing seems right with Square Enix's new approach, right, to try to focus more on their old Japanese IPs. And so I mean, me personally, if they're gonna, I mean, I wish they would still re-release the original one. But if we're getting some kind of a remake of some sort, I mean, I would definitely hope that it's done kind of like what they've been doing with the Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3. Make it in that style, but keep a lot of the original assets, right? And all that, so it doesn't change up the look of it too much. Because Chrono Trigger has a very distinct look that I think is unique onto it. And also, I would like to see that, still keeping the sprite based characters, but just fleshing it out more in 3D, and maybe give like an orchestrated soundtrack, but otherwise keep the same soundtrack. I wouldn't hate voice acting on it. And so, I mean, as far as with Chrono himself, I mean, I can take it either way, right? And I'll like the game of a voice or not, since he's a silent protagonist in the original one. But either way, though, pretty exciting. Oh, sorry, dropped my phone there. But yeah, either way, though, pretty exciting though. And yeah, we'll see what all comes out of this. But I want to say I think there's something in the air. I mean, it definitely seems like we're heading that way. So that definitely got me pretty excited. But another major news that kind of broke out too also is that just out of nowhere, right? And after this whole thing that happened with, or actually before I get to that story there, I just want to make a quick mention of this other thing too also, that Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green are coming to the Switch. And apparently it's not going to be on the Nintendo Switch Online. Looks like it's going to be like you can download it, like you pay for it and download it. And there might be physical copies, I'm not sure. But yeah, looks like it's coming out on the Switch. I'm not big into the Pokemon world, and also I don't follow too much of what's going on with that, or what these games are really all about. As far as like if they're the original Game Boy ones or the Game Boy Advance ones, I'm not sure. I think they are the Game Boy Advance ones, but either way, there you go. Right? I mean, seems like it's causing a lot of stir online. I haven't really, like I said, I don't really follow the whole Pokemon Discord thing on this. But I guess that's cool, right? Because these Pokemon games don't really seem to get released like too much as far as like the older ones. So that's cool, right? I guess. But yeah, I'll just make a mention of that because I know Pokemon is huge. So, but okay, but getting back to the original story that I was going to say, and then off this little modern day section here with is so just out of nowhere, right? And this is after again the closing of Blue Point Studios and all. Was Xbox had its news, and I mean it's pretty big. So Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond and Matt Booty, Booty, um, so they've been pretty big figures as far as Xbox goes. They, you can definitely argue, right, and all that what they've been doing with Xbox hasn't been good, but they've been the face of Xbox for several years now. And so just out of nowhere, Phil Spencer's retiring, Sarah Bond is out. I didn't quite read what's going on with her. And then Matt Booty is apparently being promoted to be an AI executive for Microsoft, and Xbox will be getting a new boss, Asha Shamara, which I don't know this how accurate this is, but I read something and all that she's coming from like has a Home Depot background. I don't know to how much true that is, but I mean that's that's a lot of change happening there, and I mean we'll see what comes of this and all, but I mean it's been Xbox has been definitely going in a completely new direction where they're almost their normal Xbox brand, like having a console, the traditional console sense, right? And all Xbox seems to be kind of doing away with that. And how that would pan out for them, I don't know. I mean, I get the feeling like Xbox itself as a console is pretty much dying, but the brand Xbox, as far as what they're doing with Game Pass, putting their games on everywhere and all that, there might be some success that they have with that. But I guess we'll just have to see how the story plays out. But
it's just one of those things where you just sort of have to accept that the times are changing, things are changing, the way games are being distributed is changing, and for better or worse, Xbox seems to be picking up on that, and maybe this is what led to this decision here, right? With some of the key players in the Xbox, management has changed a lot, and so yeah, I mean that's that's kind of a big deal. So again, we'll see how this all plays out. But yeah, I just saw that there kind of at the last second here as I was starting to edit this and wanted to throw that in there. As that's a pretty big story there. But we'll see again what all plays out of this. But yeah, definitely Xbox is it's not what it was before. The original Xbox and Xbox 360 definitely left a lot of fun memories for a lot of people. But now, well, they just seem to be sort of a you know like a third party publisher almost in a way. And even though, but their games are selling really well though, like for example on the PlayStation, right? So maybe it was the right move. We'll see. I mean, if they do get their games on the Nintendo Switch too, that could really bolster them as well too, as far as like a software, developer. But yeah, I think it's just because things are just so different now that it's throwing a lot of people off, and just more and more. Right, and if you're going to continue on with this hobby, you just sort of have to accept that things really are changing, and they're changing fast. And the old days are, starting to be just a distant memory now. But now, for sure, that's what I got here for modern gaming news.
But one more thing I wanted to touch on also here is I just keep adding to my segments here, but just wanted to reminisce a little bit about Zelda, The Legend of Zelda. So we had its 40th anniversary here. I believe it was on the 21st. So as of the time I'm recording this segment here, that would have been yesterday. And I didn't think we'd get any information. I know that there's been some frustration out there that Nintendo didn't announce anything. And, Nintendo's been kind of doing things a little weird. I haven't been keeping up too much with them as far as like a pattern goes and all, or if they even have one. But I still get the feeling like they'll announce something to some extent. That'll just probably be later on this year. Because I think that's happened fairly recently, right? Where, excuse me, where they didn't make like a big announcement on the day of the anniversary. It wasn't until a little bit later. But regardless, all right, The Legend of Zelda's 40th anniversary, and so this would have been, I believe, from its Japan release date, and way back then on the Super Famicom, yeah, I'm sorry, not on the regular Famicom. Yeah, I mean, and then eventually when it came out here in the States, it really introduced players to a sense of like exploration like never before, really, where you are given this pretty big open world for what you can consider that back in those days, and gives you the freedom of really just exploring. And I've talked about this game fairly extensively already throughout my channel, but just to kind of reiterate again, I just remember when the little bit that I would play this game at a friend's house or just watching, more of them play, is just, it just seemed like just such a fun concept to just just that, right? Just go and explore this world. You find hidden secrets, hidden, dungeons, and then the dungeons were, for the time pretty well laid out. And it was just, it really, really gave you the sense of being in an adventure and laid the groundwork for not only the Zelda series going forward, but just video games in general. As again, we hadn't really had too much of that back then. And this game definitely set the foundation for that. And then just the interest that we got from it, eventually in the years to come. Basically, Zelda is probably one of the biggest series out there still to this day, that is a very much a legacy title that it's held to a very high degree because the majority of the games that have come out on it have not only been good, but among some of the best in the industry. And that's truly an achievement there, right? And I mean, alongside with like Mario as well, too, there's only a handful of other series that you can really say that about. And somehow it just finds a way to keep the spirit of the series alive, but finding ways to keeping it fresh. And I think that's what's made this series just endure for many years now. I mean, from the latest mainline entry that we got with The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, it's kind of combining what it's already done before, where it's taking the top-down perspective that we've known and loved for years, but at the same time introducing a little bit of that sort of like creating your own objects and all to, work your way around the environment, kind of like what Tears of the Kingdom was doing, on a lesser extent, but then in the 3D world, right, what Tears of the Kingdom did. And I know that game has been faulted a little bit, and I will agree that I felt like it was just a little bit rehashing too much of Breath of the Wild. But the overall using of the God Hand and everything, I mean, that is truly, genius stuff. And when I've played of that game, I haven't quite beaten it and all, but it's just because I get, sometimes so sidetracked on it, just, creating things and all, and it really can be addicting. And so definitely shows, right, that this team, basically the people behind Zelda are just, masters of their craft. And I just can't wait to see what comes out next from this series. It's a series that I will continue to play, until, my dying days probably. And well, again, I not all of them have been complete hits, but there's been definitely a lot of great games here. And I mean, there's still several that I haven't beaten in the series. Like I haven't beaten Zelda 2. I haven't beaten A Link Between Worlds or Skyward Sword. Majora's Mask, that's another one I need to try to get through. And Tears of the Kingdom, I need to beat through that. The Minish Cap, and also the Oracle of Ages and Seasons. I still need to go through those games. But I think pretty much everyone else after that, though, out of like the mainline Zelda games, I think I've beaten the rest of them. But great series, and yeah, just true classics. So here's to 40 years of Zelda. Then let's see another 40 years, right? But what could I expect from the series going forward? I don't know. I mean, my hope, well, at least what I would hope, right? Obviously, at some point, I would love to see a brand new 3D Zelda. And what would I want that to be? I mean, I really like I'm sorry, Breath of the Wild. Yeah, well, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I think that they are just incredible open world games. It's, Breath of the Wild for me is just one of the all time greats for sure. And Tears of the Kingdom, well, I mean, I think like I probably would have liked Tears of the Kingdom more had Breath of the Wild not existed, or if I guess if it came before, had it in some alternate universe. But because it does rehash a lot of Breath of the Wild, that's why I've been slowly playing through Tears of the Kingdom because I'm like I already kind of seen a lot of this, right? I know that when the game came out, they were really talking about how like no, you're really doing a lot of different things and all that. I was like, no, you're kind of rehashing a lot of the same things, and so that for me was a bit of a bummer on it. But like I said, the whole creation engine that you can do, right, to build things and all that is really addicting though. And now that it's got its bump up to 4K 60 frames per second, or I should say 4K-ish 60 frames per second on the Switch 2, it looks really incredible, and definitely I want to finish that game at some point. But that's kind of what's held me back a lot. It's just I guess like because Breath of the Wild took me a while to beat, and I loved every moment of it. But sometimes when you beat a game like that, it's like, okay, I need a bit of a break on that. And so then I go to something like Tears of the Kingdom, which is kind of the same in a lot of ways. It's like, I don't know. I just sometimes don't have it in me to keep pushing through that game. But again, it's not, again, it's still a really great game. But do I want to see something else like that? Me personally, no. I don't know if this is doable. But I would say if they can find a way to do taking the best elements of like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but then kind of giving us back the style of like the previous 3D Zelda games like Ocarina of Time or Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. Because when it comes down to it, I slightly prefer that style over like the Breath of the Wild style. At least that's what my preference would be if they can get a game right at that, to that level. Like for example, Tears of the Kingdom. I'm sorry, God, why do I keep saying Tears of the Kingdom? Ocarina of Time and Breath of the Wild are my two favorite Zelda games, but I slightly prefer Ocarina of Time just a hair bit more because again, I just like that style more where you have a hub world, you're tackling some traditional dungeons, finding an item. Now, if somehow you can blend those two worlds together, I have no idea what that would look like, and I'm sure that would be very difficult to pull off, but if you can somehow do that, then that would be what I would hope for in a new 3D Zelda game. That'd be pretty awesome. But I can only imagine that game is still probably a few years out. I would say maybe at the very least 2 to 3 years out, right? If that. But in the meantime, though, right, the Zelda series has been known to have some pretty cool remakes and remasters come out. And so I think that's probably going to be their next Zelda game that's going to come out, is some kind of a remake or remaster. I mean, there's a lot of rumors that it's going to be the Ocarina of Time. I mean, if we can get like a Ocarina of Time with really improved graphics and, you know, updated play mechanics and all, but more or less keeping the same spirit of that game, I'd be totally down for that. I mean, I think that Ocarina of Time could use a makeover. You know, it was a bit rough on certain areas on the Nintendo 64 because, I mean, the overall framework of that game is truly incredible. Why it's, I mean, it's still regarded as one of the best games of all time. My 10th favorite game of all time. But, you know, it does have some rough edges. The 3DS remaster that they did of it, that's pretty cool. And it's definitely improves on a lot of aspects of it. And it's really a great way to play the game. You know, not much complaints on that one there, other than, you know, it's just tied to the 3DS, right? Or, you know, kind of in a small portable form factor, right? I want to, you know, if they're going to do Ocarina of Time, this is one where I do want to see, you know, as best graphics as Nintendo can do, and truly, you know, a beautiful new vision of this game. That is where I do want to see some, you know, horsepower, right? Where they're really pushing the Switch too. That would be my wish, right? You know, whether we'll get it or not, who knows, right? I mean, again, this game has been long rumored, but we'll see. But I would say the chances of this coming out, I mean, fairly high, right? I mean, I think that it's due time. I think Nintendo understands that, even though this formula of Zelda games hasn't quite been their biggest moneymaker as compared to like something like Breath of the Wild, but I think that they understand that the importance of their legacy of that game to an extent. And at least I hope so, because so many of these companies are getting away from like honoring their legacy and all that. You know, they all not seem to really care anymore, right? And just kind of, you know, create just, what is a term that people keep using nowadays? Just a bunch of slop. I mean, not that Nintendo's been doing slop, but anyway, I'm going to go on a rant on that. But I just hope that they acknowledge, right, that the importance that that game has had for them, for their company, that they would give it some love, right, and all, and give us a really awesome remake of some sort. But we'll see. My next hope is that, you know, the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, the HD versions. I mean, those versions are just so well. I mean, I would say the Wind Waker, right? I mean, there's, you know, the GameCube ones were really well done, right? Um, the HD versions that came out on the Wii U, they're really well done as well too. They improve on a lot of aspects of the GameCube games. Only there's certain little things here and there, right, where, you know, they're not completely perfect. Like, for example, on the Wind Waker, while it improves on a lot of things, I mean, you know, the sailing is more streamlined. The little fetch quest towards the end is streamlined a bit more too, also. And just the camera controls are improved on. And so there's a lot of improvements overall. But sometimes the bloom lighting that's in it, it kind of throws me off a bit, right? It's, in a way, sometimes I think I prefer the GameCube graphics more, right? But not to say, I mean, the Wind Waker HD definitely looks pretty though, still, right? And I definitely like the, you know, the widescreen, you know, support and all that it has, and that. But I would prefer to play that version there. Twilight Princess is kind of an oddball one, because it's that one there. There's not like really like a perfect version. Because you get the GameCube one, which is nice. I mean, it definitely plays good and all that. But, you know, if you're a bit of a picky on this, it doesn't have, I mean, maybe there's hacks out there, right? But official releases, that one there doesn't have a widescreen version of it and all. And then there's the Wii version, which is, you know, that one's pretty cool. But it's motion control, right? Whether you like it or hate it, you know, and then it's also tied to the Wii, right? Where, you know, that's, as of right now, I mean, you have to have either the Wii or the Wii U to officially play that game. And then there's a Wii U version where that one is pretty good. I mean, it's HD, you know, it cleans up the game, you know, pretty nice. And it, you know, the gameplay's overall pretty good to play on. But there's certain odd little glitches here, like audio glitches and all that. Not that big of a deal, but again, right, it just a little bit of nuisance here and there, right? And all that, it's like, ah, dang it, it's not quite, you know, the version you would completely want. So my hope, I mean, I don't know. I mean, those two have been rumored for so long too, also. But my hope is that they would re-release them somehow, the HD version. I would still want the HD versions on the Switch too. I mean, if they do that, my guess would be that they would sell them separate, sell them for fuck, almost like probably $60. Oh, but but yeah, they would still sell though, right? And I mean, I know eventually I would want to get them, and for me, it's just having things on the Switch. If it's not a game that's like the highest fidelity, or like a modern game, for example, like, okay, Resident Evil Requiem, right? That game's coming out on all the systems. And while it looks incredible on the Switch too, for what it is, right? That's a game that I would still want to get like on the PlayStation 5, for example, just because I want it in the highest possible visual fidelity. But if it's a game that's out that it's not, at the highest tier of like graphical fidelity of what's out there right now, I just generally want things on the Switch if I can, or somehow that I can play them portably conveniently. Because again, in my life, just being able to have that hybrid option, it just makes a big deal for me here. And so having games like the Twilight Princess and Wind Waker would truly make my day, right? And I'll have to have them on the Switch too, because I have different ways of playing that game, but I would just really like an official release. Although I will say, right, if Nintendo doesn't do it, here's one for you guys. For anyone that's into emulation, you already know this. But for someone that's not, but you're kind of frustrated, right? That Nintendo won't release the Wii U versions of Zelda and of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. They run absolutely incredible on the Steam Deck, pretty much flawless. So if you're able to emulate them on there, so there you go. So there's that way you can play them as well too. But yeah, either way, but still, I still hope for though, right? That that they would release them on there, because again, my stance on all of this is like, if you give me an official version of a game that I really, really want, I will happily buy the game eventually, right? If you don't though, then um God, I'm trying to sing a pirate song, but I don't know what the hell I'm singing. What's it? God, jeez. It's early in the morning. I was going to sing some pirate song. I don't even know what I'm trying to sing. I was going to sing Hi Ho, Hi Ho. And oh, shit. I was going to sing the Snow White, the stupid dwarf song. How did I get that compared to a pirate? I have no idea. Anyways, it's 6:18. It's early in the morning. Anyways, moving on. But yeah, that's what I hope for eventually we get some information on that. I guess another thing that I really wouldn't mind actually too, if they went this route, is the original Legend of Zelda. Why not remake that game? I think that there's a lot of potential for a remake on the original Legend of Zelda game. I almost wouldn't want them to do A Link to the Past, because I think that game is almost perfect as is for what it is. But something like the Legend of Zelda, I mean, that game, it's iconic. It has a good framework to it and all. It's just, could use some improvements. And why not? At least give us the version that came out on the Satellaview back on I think the Satellaview was what it was called, right? The Nintendo service that they had, the satellite service where you can get some games on that back in Japan. Because they had like some kind of like a remastered version on that. That's basically the Legend of Zelda game, only with like Super Nintendo graphics. At least give us that. But we'll see. But either way, I hope something cool comes out of all this. And yeah, here's to another 40 years of The Legend of Zelda. All right, going into 2008, though. 2008. So this year was pretty cool. It definitely, the PlayStation 3 started really coming into its own. And so now the competition really started heating up between, again, the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 and also PC, right? But then also the PSP and the Nintendo DS, right? They were still duking it out. And ultimately the DS ended up winning by quite a big margin against the PSP. But it's not to say that the PSP didn't hold its own though, right? And all, I mean, it still sold pretty well for what it did. And there was still some pretty cool games on it overall. And so, yeah, I mean, just overall, just a very competitive generation. And the Wii, I didn't mention the Wii because the Wii was kind of doing its own thing. And so while I won't put the Wii as far as like truly being competitive against the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, as far as like the output of games that it had that were like the in-demand games of the time outside of Nintendo games, they were doing their own things where they were definitely catching the casual audience, and that's why its sales just blew up, right? Where it ended up being the highest selling console of this generation, right? But again, it was kind of doing its own different thing, and not to hate on it or anything, but and it worked for them, obviously, right? It's just, the Wii. Well, I've talked about the Wii already. It's just, it was a nice alternative, right, for like a different kind of gaming experience, I guess, right, and on for the Nintendo games. But either way, well, I guess my point is that this was a very competitive generation, and then all the cool stuff that you had, like on the online storefronts, right, like the PSN and Xbox Live Arcade. There was just a lot of cool stuff in this generation that came out, and a lot of different ways of playing games, and so yeah, good stuff. So, but let's get into it here in 2008 with some facts and statistics on the year. So 2008 saw many new installments in established video game franchises, just such as Grand Theft Auto 4, Fallout 3, Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots, Gears of War 2, Super Smash Bros. Brawl, Persona 4, Fable 2, Call of Duty World at War, Mario Kart Wii, Madden NFL 09, NBA Live 09, NBA 2K9, and WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2009. New intellectual properties included Army of Two, Dead Space, Left 4 Dead, Little Big Planet, Mirror's Edge, iRacing, Race Driver Grid, and Spore, The Blob, and Meat Boy. Okay, let's see. So the highest selling, so here in the United States, so again, I'm focusing mainly on the United States just because that's the region that I'm from, and I'm sure you don't want to hear me just babbling on a bunch of numbers from all over the world, right? And all, I feel like that'd just be a little bit too much. But if you happen to be listening from any other part of the world, truly appreciate it. I hope you can at least still get some information on this. And my apologies if I don't cover your region. I just try to keep this I like this podcast to be a bit lengthy so you have something to listen to just in the background if you're, driving or doing chores or whatever, right? And almost like you're having just a long conversation with a friend about video games. But at the same time, I think if I'm just rattling off numbers for a good stretch, it kind of, might be a bit boring. But if you are listening from any other part of the world, or really anybody that would be listening to this, I truly appreciate you listening to this, and hopefully I can at least give you a distraction of some sort. But for the U.S., though, as far as for the video game console sales for the major three systems that were out, so this is for the first 6 months of 2008. So number one with the Wii with 3.5 million units sold, and the PS3 with 1.6 million, and the Xbox 360 at 1.34 million. So the PS3 was picking up steam, right? And it's crazy that the Wii almost pretty much sold double of what those systems sold. I tell you, the Wii for its first few years, it was a force to be reckoned with. But for the best-selling video games of 2008 in the United States, number one was Wii Play, 5.28 million units sold. Number two was Mario Kart Wii with 5 million units sold. Number three was Wii Fit with 4.53 million units sold. And number four was Super Smash Bros. Brawl with 4.17 million units sold. Number five was Grand Theft Auto 4 on the Xbox 360 with 3.29 million units sold. Number six was Call of Duty World at War with on the Xbox 360 with 2.75 million units sold. Number seven was Gears of War 2 on the 360 with 2.31 million units sold. Number 8 was Grand Theft Auto 4 on the PS3 with 1.89 million units sold. That's crazy. So the one on the Xbox 360 really sold out much more. Number 9 was Madden NFL 09 on the 360 with 1.87 million units sold. And number 10 was Mario Kart DS on the Nintendo DS with 1.65 million units sold. That's crazy that the top 4 games were from the Nintendo Wii. That's nuts. And let's see. As of this, so let's see. So as of May 1st of 2008, the best-selling console games of all time in the United States, number one was Grand Theft Auto San Andreas with 9.4 million units sold. Number two was Guitar Hero 3 Legends of Rock at 8.2 million. I tell you, those good Guitar Hero games were a big hit back then. Number three was Madden NFL 07 with 7.70 million units sold. Number 4 was Grand Theft Auto 4 Vice City with 7.3 million units sold. Number 5 was Madden NFL 06 with 6.7 million 70 million units sold. Number 6 was Halo 2 with 6.61 million units sold. Number 7 was Madden NFL 08 with 6.60 million units sold. Number 8 was Call of Duty Modern Warfare with 6.25 million units sold. Number 9 was Grand Theft Auto 3 with 6.2 million units sold. And number 10 was Madden NFL 2005 with 6.10 million units sold. So some big sellers there. So really the only one I think that was added to that was, I think, well, like the newer Madden games and then the Call of Duty Modern Warfare, I believe. But Grand Theft Auto still, a lot of Grand Theft Auto games on there, right? And that would only continue as the years went on, as far as for like the best game. Game of the year? Let's see. So I think for this year, some of the games that were considered for like game of the year, let's see. There's a few different ones here because it talks about the Golden Joystick Awards, VGA, the 12th Annual Interactive Achievement Awards, the 5th British Academy Awards, and 9th Developer Choice Awards. I want to say that I think the VGA was like the big one there, right? And then also the game that they have here was also from 2008. So I would say that probably the game of the year that, from what I recall, at least in the conversations back then and all, and what I can recall of like some magazines back then that seemed to, it was either between like Grand Theft Auto 4 or Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. Those were sort of like the standout titles that really seemed to, that critics really seemed to enjoy. And yeah, I mean, both of them are really great. For me personally, when it all comes out, at the time, I should say, at the time, it was Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. I'm going to talk more about that game a little bit later, but that game I absolutely fell in love with at the time. Now that I've gone back to it, as the era's kind of cleared out and all, I mean, it actually still cracks my top 100, but I've definitely, dropped it down several pegs. And a lot of it is just because I do really enjoy the game, and I was absolutely blown away with it. But the first time I played it, there is, after I played it again, I was like, oh, there really is not much gameplay in this. And while I know I'm gonna kind of contradict myself, right, when I say that I do like a Metal Gear Solid game to have that crazy convoluted story. This one, I think like games like Part 1 really nailed that to an extent, as far as like having a good balance of story and gameplay. 2 and 3 were kind of towing the line on that, right? But I still felt I got enough gameplay on it. But Part 4 really was heavy, on story and not too much gameplay. And so for that, I did have to knock down some pegs. But although the gameplay that is there is still very fun and original and, really well done and all. And so you really have to play this game to really enjoy the story, right? And then also that you've been following the game up to this point, the series, I should say, up to this point. But yeah, I remember the first time I played it, I was blown away. But anyway, I'll talk more about that game later. But for me personally, though, my favorite would have been Gears of War 2. I really enjoy that game. That game is still a game that has held up for me the most that came out this year. And yeah, I just always have a really fun time with that game there. Let's see. But events that happened during this year. So let's see. So in June 28th. So Blizzard Entertainment announces Diablo 3 in Paris, France. July 15th to the 17th, E3 2008 in Los Angeles, California is held. On July 29th, the game developers Joseph and Melissa Batten die in a murder-suicide. Oh my gosh. Who are they? Yikes. Sorry, not to kind of get sidetracked here, but that just seemed a little intense. And I just kind of read it. Wasn't really paying attention until I just read that headline or that little thing there about this. Oh, geez. Okay. I'm not going to go into that. That's, seems very tragic. And all right. But yeah, well, either way, rest in peace. July 31st to August 3rd, QuakeCon 2008 at the Hilton Anatoly in Dallas, Texas is held. August 21st to the 24th, the Game Conventions in Leipzig, Germany is held. October 2nd through the 4th, Nintendo Conference held in San Francisco and Tokyo, Japan. October 3rd through the 5th, E for All at the Los Angeles Convention Center in California is held. October 9th to the 12th, the Tokyo Game Show at the Makuhari Messe International Convention is held, along with in Mihamaku. October 9th to the 12th, also Game Convention in Asia in Singapore is held. October 10th through the 11th, BlizzCon 2008 in Anaheim is held. And November 13th, Zeebo was announced. The console is aiming for developing countries. December 1st, the National Amusement Summer Redstone sells his controlling stake in Midway Games to private investor Mark Thomas for $100,000 and assumes $70 million of senior secured and unsecured debt. December 9th, Infogrames, Atari's parent company, purchases Cryptic Studios. And December 14th, the 2008 Spike Video Game Awards is held. So very interesting stuff there. And I guess not a whole lot of stuff as far as I guess events and things that came out during this year. It seemed like the last few years there was a whole bunch of that stuff there, but a lot of conventions though, and things that were being held like that. I haven't really. I always wish I would have gone to like an E3 or something like that, but just never got the chance. But yeah, cool stuff though. Let's get into some games now here. So once again, my little disclaimer, I'm obviously not going to be able to hit on everything that came out this year. I just jotted down here some of the games that definitely stood out for me, and also just games that I'm aware of right now and all that came out this year that had some kind of a cultural impact of some sort. So again, if I missed something though that came out this year, again, I'm just sort of like cherry picking a little bit, right, as much as I can, to talk about some of these games here. But to my surprise, at least from what I saw on Wikipedia for releases in this year, Persona 3, the FES version, and Persona 4 came out on the PlayStation 2 this year, at least in North America. Again, they probably had a re-release or a release earlier, maybe like in Japan, but at least in North America, they were here on this year. And it kind of surprised me because I know there were late releases on the PlayStation 2, but I was like, oh wow, all the way up to 2008. Because it seems like this was when the Persona series really started picking up. Because the series had already been out and, making some noise, right, amongst JRPG fans. But it seemed like, around this time is when they really started picking up steam. And, well, obviously, right, because looks like this is the year where it had an updated version of Persona 3 and Persona 4 come out. Which, I know both of them are really beloved games. So, yeah. So I'm still kind of working my way through Persona 5 very, very slowly. But when I played of it, I really enjoy it. But on the handheld front, I actually jotted down some games for this year. So we had Chrono Trigger, which came out on the Nintendo DS. So this is a nice little port that was done on the system here. Because you get Chrono Trigger, which is one of the most amazing games of all time. And you get some pretty cool, functions using the dual screen. Nothing groundbreaking or anything, but, just a different way to play the game. But you get I would say for the most part, improved script. And also you get a few side extra content, which from my understanding, I haven't really messed around with the side content on this version. From my understanding, it's nothing anything too crazy, but you do get that extra side content along with like the little animated cartoon that came with like the version that came out on the PlayStation as well too. And so overall, just it's Chrono Trigger, another way to play this game, and was pretty cool right now. Because again, we hadn't quite really gotten to the point where we started seeing a lot of remakes and remasters. We were starting to see some of them, but not a lot. So whenever we would get a beloved game ported over to some extent from from an older generation, they were still very much appreciated. And so Chrono Trigger, again, being one of the best games of all time, right? It was just very cool that it got this port on the DS. Yeah, I would say if you're looking on playing Chrono Trigger, you're wanting to play it an official, through some kind of an official version, this is definitely not a bad way to play it. And actually, for a lot of people, I would sure it's a more preferred way to play it. I've gone a little ways into this particular version here, and yeah, I mean it's great. I hold it up there just like with the Super Nintendo. Again, give or take a few different things here and there, right? Again, if you're okay with playing it on a portable system, I know for some that's not kind of not cool, but for some people really enjoy it. So your mileage will vary on that. But for what it is, though, it's a really great port, and definitely not a bad way to play it, right? I mean, I would say the best versions to play of Chrono Trigger are, I mean, it's going to come down to either the Super Nintendo or the DS version, just depending on how much you enjoy the updated script, which it does update some things, but Frog loses a little bit of his personality, though, right? Because he doesn't talk completely in that old English Shakespearean style. But I would say it's a better written script, though, overall. Nothing major, but just I feel like it's just buttoned up a lot, or not a lot, but to some extent. And yeah, I mean it's you can't go wrong with either version. There's a slight little change to the music, right? Where I would probably say, I don't know, for me, my ears, the Super Nintendo one seems a slightly better, but it's really it's a small little difference, right? So you probably wouldn't even notice. So long story short, either way, it's a fine version to play the this one or the Super Nintendo one. But again, here's hoping, like I said earlier, for a Chrono Trigger remake, remaster of some sort. Come on, Square, please do it, and please don't fuck it up. That's all I ask, please. But anyways. Another game for the handheld, so jumping over to the PSP, there was a Dissidia Final Fantasy. I've played a little bit of this game, and it seems interesting. I remember I did get into it for a bit. I thought it was cool how it's, like a fighting game, but then it has its little story to it. And I thought it was just kind of cool how you can get, it's almost like its Avengers style of like all these Final Fantasy characters, all in one little silly story. And I thought that was cool, though. So this is definitely a game I would want to give a little bit more time to, as the time that I played it way back then, I actually did kind of get into it. The graphics are really impressive too, also for the DS. I mean, I'm sorry, not the DS, the PSP. I mean, basically the PSP was a slightly, to my eyes, it was a slightly less powerful PlayStation 2, but for the most part, it can do PlayStation 2 level graphics, right? And so some of the stuff that you were seeing on this small little screen was really impressive for the time. But speaking of that, though, also there was a God of War Chains of Olympus. And so seeing a God of War game running on this small little handheld, I was truly impressed. And it's pretty good. It's the game it's like a prequel to the previous God of War games. And so, with a lot of prequels that have come out, a lot of them kind of seem unnecessary as far as like the story goes and all. But it's not to say that it's a bad story or anything, or that the gameplay is bad and all. It's just sort of, again, like, this it's cool that it exists, but also not doesn't feel like something that you must play, right? But for what it is, though, it definitely plays like it's the PlayStation 2 versions. And it controls really well. You get some cool magic, and because this port was done by Ready at Dawn, I believe, and so they did a pretty good their own take on a God of War game. And there's definitely an epic opening, just like all the God of War games, and overall the last boss and the little story that it has and all, very cool, right? I mean, I would say if you're into God of War, definitely worth playing, so you can get, I would say it's not necessary to play, if you just want the main scope of what God of War games are. But as an extra filler, right, that fills in some of the gaps between, Kratos' story, it's definitely worth checking out. I mean, it plays well and all, and so you'll have a fun time with it for sure. Not quite as good as like the PlayStation 2 ones, but it's still good though. Just the one thing though, a bit of a knock though on this, it's kind of more because of the system itself, because it doesn't have that second analog stick where you can use to dodge your way out of attacks. You have to hold down the two trigger buttons and then move the left analog stick to be able to dodge like that. And so sometimes in the heat of the action and all, it's not the most fluid way to do that. But again, it's, that's just kind of more of a fault of the hardware, right? Where it lacked that extra analog stick. But still, not a bad way to play it. And it's God of War on the go was definitely pretty cool back then. And I've had a lot of enjoyment with this game before. And like I said, right, I would definitely, if you like the God of War games, like really like them, you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of this one here. But jumping over to the main consoles, though, so it has some multi-platform games here to go over. And so when I say multi-platform, though, for the most part, it's going to be the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. The Wii might have had some ports of these games, but the ports that came out on the Wii, usually what they did was like they did them a little bit differently because, again, obviously it's not as graphically as powerful, and then the different control scheme. And so and a lot of the ports that were done on the Wii that were also on the 360 or the PS3, I'm not too familiar with them. So again, this is just going to be, when I say multiplats, I'm mainly talking about the PS3 and the Xbox 360 ones. But we had Mortal Kombat. Well, we had the next entry in the Mortal Kombat series, but this one they went in a different route because it's Mortal Kombat versus DC Universe. And so it's just that. It's Mortal Kombat characters versus like the DC Comics characters. And I've actually been interested in playing this game. I haven't played it, but just because I'm a big DC Comics fan, and I understand that this game seems to be looked down upon a little bit, but I still love to play it though, because I love the Injustice games that came out afterwards, and it seems like this is sort of the start of that. And so I'd be curious enough to play it just for that there alone, understanding that I know that they tamed down the fatalities and all, because obviously, right, I know you got the DC characters in there, so it would kind of seem weird of, ripping Superman's spine out, although that would be kind of cool, but yeah, but still, I'd be curious to check this game out though. We also had Silent Hill Homecoming that came out on the 360 and the PS3. I played a little bit of this game back then. I want to say, I think I rented it. I never bought it, but so I must have rented it. And all I remember was that I really wanted to get into it because I love Silent Hill so much, but I just couldn't. After like about 2 to 3 hours of play, I was like, I'm just not feeling this. And I don't recall a lot of it. I just remember that I was like, nah, sorry, I can't get into this. So this is where Silent Hill just started kind of going downhill, and which would last for many years to come, and which was unfortunate just because it was a great series. But again, this is where, if I think this is the case with Silent Hill Homecoming. Like I've said before, right? This is the year where, or not the year, the generation where a lot of legacy Japanese developers were starting to send their work over to like Western developers, because again, it was the times were different at this time, and Western developers were just the ones that were more, I guess, considered the better ones, even up against the likes of like Konami, Capcom, and all that, right? And so just kind of an interesting time here and all. And so I think that's what happened with Silent Hill Homecoming, because I want to say I think a Western developer developed this, but at the same time they weren't even really able to pull it off, right? Because Silent Hill has a certain Japanese horror is different than like Western horror, and they have a certain, I can't really put it into words like what the differences are. I guess if I'm going to try to put it into words, it's something that's a little bit more subtle, like in terms of like, it's not like, I mean, things are gory and all, or there's even jump scares and all. It's just, it's like based more like in themes and, a little bit more methodical, I guess is one way of putting it, right? And so Silent Hill Homecoming seemed to lack that from like what the previous Silent Hill games had. Because for me, Silent Hill, 1 through 4 at least, definitely feel like Japanese horror. Like if you ever seen like movies, right, from there, and it's different, right? And again, I'm not the best at trying to describe like what the differences are between Western and East and Japanese horror, but basically it just lacked that. And so I don't know, the game just felt really lackluster for that there. But yeah, it was an interesting time though, right? Because of that there. But okay, I wanted to play, I found it here. Sorry, I had to pause it a little bit as I was looking for this here. So hopefully the audio comes out okay. I wanted to play this video here that, well, you'll just hear the audio, but basically it was, it was at some kind of a conference, and there's I believe he might be a Japanese developer, I'm not sure, talking to a panel of people there, of developers, I would assume. And I believe yeah, okay, so apparently, so the guy that's commenting back on the question, his name is Phil Fish. I don't know much about who these people are or anything. I just remember this clip being played back then and all. And again, it's just sort of like what was the attitude of like how Western developers were starting to just be the main players in this generation here. And I mean, I will say this, right, before I play this clip. First and foremost, this is not a dock against anyone, right? I'm mainly playing this and not just because it was part of video game history and all, and just what the attitude was during this time, because there was a big old shift. And so, and again, I don't know where these people are at now, if there was ever an apology made or anything. And I definitely don't play this, to try to offend anybody, specifically anybody that was a Japanese developer and all, because, well, on one end, y'all kind of really popularized video games for many years. And on another end, y'all are really doing really good now, right? It was just a stretch though where unfortunately a lot of Japanese developers just they just really a lot of the games that they were making aren't just they weren't of the quality that we would expect before. So a lot of what this Phil Fish guy is saying, though he's very rude about the way he says it, there is some truth to it too also. And so again, I played this more just because it is a part of video game history that kind of shows what the attitude was during this time stretch here, right? So please, like I said, right, when I'm playing this, just know that that's where I'm coming from on this. And so hopefully there's no offense taken on anything on this here. But anyways, hopefully the sound comes through okay on this, but here's the audio clip from this here.
Thank you for excellent movies. And I'm a freelance game programmer. And in this movie, you were inspired from Super Mario and Metroid and Rockman. I am so proud of it, and as a Japanese. And my question is, and what could you tell me what kind of about recently Japanese what do you think about the recently Japanese game?
Is it what is about Japanese games that inspired us?
Recent. I'm sorry.
They suck. I'm sorry. Like, you guys need to get with the times and make better interfaces and like update your technology. We're totally kicking your ass. Back then, you guys were the king of the world, but your time has passed. I'm so sorry.
Did you look at his face? Look at what you did, Phil. I have a more specific game design comment that is
So hateful.
Swoop in and be constructive. No, this is well, I mean, I don't like Japanese games either. The thing that I don't like.
And actually, as I'm playing this, the guy that's talking right now looks like that's Cliffy B. So I believe that's him. So I think he's the dude from Gears of War.
About them, all the modern ones that I've played, except like Dark Souls and Demon Souls and stuff, is you sit down and the game treats you like an idiot, right? Like you have to click through like 700 little boxes telling you how to do everything. There's this idea, so Western game designers, and I'm only familiar with the game design dialogue in the West, but old school games like adventure games had all this random stuff where you had to read the designer's mind, right? And at some point we understood, things have to kind of make sense for the player to expect to get through them, right? So we have to train people on our game mechanics, and then the rest of the game can be expanded out from that initial training, right? I feel like Japanese games take that too far, and Japanese games feel like it's illegal to ever let the player do anything that has not explicitly been shown to the player in painstaking detail earlier in the game. And what that does is it kills the joy of discovery. And that's the thing that I really value about games is...
Or actually, I don't know if that is Cliffy B. Kind of looks like him. He just has his head shaved, but he kind of sounds and looks like him.
And from
like you have to click through like 700 little boxes telling you how to do everything. There's this idea, so Western game designers, and I'm only familiar with the game design dialogue in the West, but old school games like adventure games had all this random stuff where you had to read the designer's mind, right? And at some point we understood, things have to kind of make sense for the player to expect to get through them, right? So we have to train people on our game mechanics, and then the rest of the game can be expanded out from that initial training, right? I feel like Japanese games take that too far, and Japanese games feel like it's illegal to ever let the player do anything that has not explicitly been shown to the player in painstaking detail earlier in the game. And what that does is it kills the joy of discovery. And that's the thing that I really value about games is when you figure something out that you haven't been shown, right? And when you show the player everything, you're turning it into an exercise, and it's an exercise that's kind of insulting because of course I can follow the exercise. You told me what to do, right? And then they make me click through so much bad dialogue. I mean, Western game dialogue is terrible also, but at least we hit spacebar and we can like skip the whole cutscene or whatever. But when they come in and make you hit yeah. Okay, cutting it off there. But a more
nice
politic way of saying what you're saying.
I mean, I think everybody would like to go back to games that you just pop in and you start playing and it's an adventure, like how, I mean, that's all of my childhood memories.
I think that Zelda games should just start with a prompt that says, "Have you played a Zelda game since 1996?"
Yeah.
And then you can skip the first 45 minutes to 2 or 3 hours.
Now, of course, before this goes up on blogs and stuff, right, there are exceptions, right? There are Japanese games that are different from that. But the trend, just like the trend in America is like, soldier looking down a gun sight, shooting dudes. It's the same feeling.
Street Fighter 4.
Yeah, Street Fighter 4 is pretty good. Yeah. But I think the Zelda comparison is really good. If you look at the first Zelda and the latest Zelda, the first Zelda it just drops you into that world, and it's a completely open, non-linear world, and it's dangerous and it's hard, and you have to like learn from your mistakes and figure things out. And there are these secrets, and the secrets are not obvious at all, which makes them secret and interesting. And then you play the latest Zelda, and it's the most like, it's just a straight corridor. It's just holding your hand the whole time. All the secrets have like an arrow pointing at them. It's just like, you can break this wall with a bomb because there's a little crack, and there's all the surprise and magic and like danger and mystery is just gone completely because of this obsession with like tutorials and making sure that the player knows about everything. Like it kills it for me.
But what's awesome about that is it's really easy to convince yourself that that's good game design, right? Like, of course we have to put an indication.
You have to clearly communicate things to the player.
It's like you have to communicate affordances, right? So therefore, all the blow-upable walls have cracks on them, right? And it's just, being logical about game design is too easy to take too far, and then you have nothing. You have a joyless husk, right?
A joyless husk.
Yeah, let's just leave it a joyless husk.
Japanese games are a joyless husk.
So I'm gonna say, if you're not in line right now for a question, just stay seated because I'm gonna try to plow.
Okay. All righty. So that was sort of the, and again, right, the way they came about it, well, at least the first guy, right, was a little, it's like, okay, dude. But they're not necessarily wrong, though, because a lot of what the second guy, which again, I don't know if it's Cliffy B or not. My first thought was like it's him, but then I'm not sure now. But anyways, a lot of what they say, though, was kind of true. And I remember this with a lot of Japanese games back then, is that there just was like this tutorial after tutorial after tutorial. And even to this day, I will say that is sort of the thing now. Only now, though, a lot of the games, though, they just have the overall game, though, is just really excellent, right, on where you're able to forgive that a little bit more. But back then, I just remember that seemed to be the case where everything was a little bit more slow paced, where the UI was a bit boring, the pacing of everything was a bit boring. And so, and the crazy thing was that games before this, though, it didn't really have that problem. So I don't know what happened in that shift there, because like I will take a game like, okay, so assume it, like, let's say if that was Cliffy B, okay? So let's say like a game like Resident Evil 4. An amazing game, right? Really well paced from get-go. It drops you in, gives you enough instructions on how to play the game, and then boom, you're going, right? And everything feels really excellent. The level design is really, well done, and the pacing and everything, and doesn't bog you down with a bunch of tutorials and all that. Well, Epic Games or Cliffy B and all, they were really inspired by that from, when they made their Gears of War, and then, eventually Gears of War 2. And so those games were kind of the same too also, where it just really quick tutorials, let's go, and everything was really well paced and everything. And but for some reason, though, like I said, a lot of Japanese games during the stretch here just started feeling the opposite of that. And so, yeah, there's like a stretch, and it's not only the tutorials and all, it's just like when you push a button, things just, like to advance through in a tutorial, like, I don't know, a lot of it just felt a little bland in ways. And I remember feeling that at the time. I was like, what is it? And I couldn't quite put my finger on it back then. And so it wasn't until afterwards, in retrospect, right, I was like, yeah, just a lot of Japanese developed games struggled with this, because there was just like, there felt like this need to just put a lot of tutorials in the games that seemed unnecessary, where it's like, okay, I've played games before, and I understand maybe a lot of it was because, you're really trying to tap into a casual market and, you have to assume that you're making it for the least common denominator as far as like game players go, that maybe you're, someone that never played a video game before is picking up a controller for the first time. So like I'll take, for example, like if you've ever given the controller to someone that is not a video game player, right? And you're, and all of a sudden it's like a 3D game where it's got second analog controls, right? And you got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, like 8, 9, 10 buttons on the controller, right? It's like, oh my God, what do all this do? It can seem overwhelming. So in that sense, I get that. But it definitely killed the pacing, though, right, on some games. And so I think that's where that conversation there was had. I don't know what year exactly that conversation was done on. But I felt it was interesting, though, because, again, it definitely reflected what the attitude was towards video games at the time as far as the developers go. And, for what it was, I mean, there was definitely the Western developers were certainly really kicking butt during this generation. But what's crazy, though, is that they took a lot of inspiration from a lot of Japanese games that had been done before in the past, right? So that's what was interesting about this whole thing here. But, again, the video game industry has gone through like its ups and downs, growing pains and all. And not only that, but throughout the different regions as well, too. And so like nowadays where we're at, right? I mean, a lot of Western games just feel very sanitized, very, things that we've talked about before, live service stuff and all, and where a lot of more Eastern developed games are the ones that, at least for me personally, have been the ones that I've been more interested in. So, times change and all. So again, I just wanted to play that because it sort of reflected, from a real convention that was had, right, the attitudes of what was going on at this time there. But okay, yeah, let's see. So let's move on forward though from that. And so that was on Silent Hill Homecoming, right? But like I said, because that was a perfect example though, right, of like a Japanese developer giving their IP over to Western, which still happens to this day. I mean, like Silent Hill 2 was given over to Bluebird team, who they're more Western developers, but I think they're just, I think that some of these companies now are understanding more what made a lot of these Japanese IPs really great in the first place. So where during the 7th generation, maybe not quite as much, right? Because that's the thing. They handed them over to Western developers and a lot of times they couldn't even make them work, right? So, it was a learning period, I think, for both sides, right, during the stretch here. But one game that was good, though, was for Burnout Paradise. And so another game in this beloved series, at least for me, I mean, I absolutely love the series. Burnout Paradise took from the same gameplay from like the previous Burnout game. So this is where the car crashing game, only now kind of put it in a bit of an open world. And so it was pretty cool when it did that. I still prefer Burnout Revenge, but this is definitely a cool game though. And it's always cool to listen to the Guns N' Roses Welcome to Paradise City song. Just a cool overall game. And I would say that the open world, it kind of adds to the game, kind of doesn't, but it's still a great game though in the series. But we also got Sonic Unleashed, and so this was also a multi-plat game. And so Sonic Unleashed, I never played this game, so I can't say much about it. I just know that it's a 3D Sonic game, and you turn into some kind of a werewolf-looking thing, a were-Sonic thing. It seems to be, for some people, one of the more favorite 3D Sonic games. So, but I can't really comment on it. I've never played this game, so I don't know what it's all about. But yeah, just for me, Sonic during the stretch here, I was like, I just was not interested. It's another game. None of the games that were coming out during this time stretch here seemed appealing to me. And so I think at the time for me, I was just kind of like, Sonic is dead, right? But these games still sold pretty well, right? I mean, Sonic was still a very popular figure. And, but in my eyes, though, at the time, I was like, I just felt like Sonic just belonged in 2D, though. But we also got Prince of Persia. So this one here was trying to do its own thing now, separated from the previous trilogy that was on the 6th generation. It has a bit kind of an open world now, and the graphics are a little cel shaded. The main prince now is voiced by Nolan North, which, Nolan North is great, but just seems a little off-putting when you're hearing his voice, right, with a character that's supposed to be from Persia. But I remember the game playing pretty good, but because it was open world, it felt a little bland as well too. So it's a game that I guess I would have to go back and play to really refresh my memory on it. But I just remember at the time playing it, I was like, it's not bad. It just wasn't like the Prince of Persia trilogy that came out on the previous generation. And so for that, there it just didn't hold my interest for too long. But I do remember the controls were good and all, and it played well. I think it was just the overall like level layouts and design and all that seemed a little uninspired. But we also had Soul Calibur 4. And so this one was pretty cool because of what they did. So kind of like what they did in the previous generation with Soul Calibur 2, where each platform got an exclusive character. So that's what this one did here. And so Soul Calibur 4, it's the weapon-based fighter. You know, we're on the, well, technically actually the 5th entry, because again, there was Soul Edge or Soul Blade at first. Continues on, you know, great gameplay, you know, really great graphics too. Also, I mean, the game looked pretty incredible at the time, and you know, running, because again, there wasn't a whole lot of games that would run at 60 frames per second, but this is one of them, and yeah, it just looked really great and all. But the exclusive characters that I got was that on the PlayStation 3, you got Darth Vader, and then on the PlayStation 4, you got Yoda. No, I'm sorry, on the PlayStation 4, the Xbox 360, you got Yoda. And eventually, I think you can buy the, you know, like Vader on the 360 and Yoda on the PlayStation 3. But those were the exclusive characters that it came with. And then also it had the character, what was his name? Star Killer, I believe, that was coming out from the Star Wars Unleashed game. Actually, I don't know if this game came out this year or not, but basically, you know, I think it was just another way for, you know, them trying to advertise for that game, I guess, in a way where you can play that Star Killer character. And that character was on both platforms there, but definitely had a bit of a Star Wars sort of influence on the game here as far as like, you know, extra content. And so that was pretty cool, right? Darth Vader, I mean, he's cool to play as, and Yoda as well too. I mean, he's really fast and all. And so both of them were fun additions, you know, where they're not, you know, I would say, I mean, they fit for the most part pretty well within the overall roster of Soul Calibur games. But yeah, it was just a cool addition, right? And kind of a fun way to, you know, extra characters, right, to put into this franchise here. But then we got Devil May Cry 4, which I already talked about earlier in my little Rolly of Gaming thing. But just to kind of reiterate again, yeah, I mean, it's a cool game. It's a fun game. And again, this is sort of like a game, though, that Japanese developed, right? Because this one was still done by, you know, Japanese development, you know, of Capcom. And I mean, you know, the game was, again, it was pretty cool to see it running at 60 frames per second. Because again, this generation just wasn't really known for that. But something about the game, though, that, you know, I kind of struggled with this game a bit. And part of it due to that, you know, you don't control Dante, at least at first. And then also the level designs, again, felt a little uninspired. And then there's quite a bit of backtracking also on it. And so for that, it just, you know, kind of hurts the game for me a bit. But the gameplay itself, though, is fun, though. Like the combat and everything, that all controls really well and all. And it's still fun. It's just the overall setting and the structure of the game and all that just felt a little uninspired. But cool little intro, though, at first. So I will give it that, though, there. But if anything, though, it was cool to see it on the 360. I played it on the PlayStation 3, but yeah, it was on the 360 as well, too. But another game, though, that was really cool during this generation was Dead Space. So this game, it was made by, what was the name of the developer? Visceral? Do I got that right? I don't know. But it was a division of EA, Electronic Arts. And so Dead Space, what I really liked about it was that there was this movie that came out in the, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s, maybe, called Event Horizon. So it had Sam Fisher. God, who else did I have in it? Lawrence Fishburne, I think. But either way, what it is, it's a basically hell in space movie. And so I always thought that movie was kind of cool. And this game reminded me a lot of that. And it's basically you play this character named Isaac. He's like an engineer, and you go with your team to this big old space freighter out in the middle of nowhere in space, and to investigate what's going on, and then eventually find out that it's just been infested with like these demons, and all from hell, or honestly I forgot a lot of the story, but ultimately they're just these fucked up looking things that seem to be out to kill you, and you want to chop off their limbs, and it's pretty cool. But yeah, it's really scary. I mean, this game is frightening, and it does a really good job of setting a really creepy atmosphere, in this abandoned, isolated spaceship. And it's I mean, the jump scares on it are really frightening. The setting and overall that it sets up is really frightening. Your character looks pretty cool too also, where I like the way that they use his suit to sort of give you a little bit of light, so you can easily identify him on the screen there, as eventually you get bombarded with all these necromorphs, I believe they're called. But what's cool about it though is because you're not necessarily a soldier, you're like an engineer. So some of the weapons that you use are like engineer style weapons, right? Where it's like, kind of like, I don't know, like what is it, like nail guns or things like that, right? And all, but it's really interesting, cool little story to it, great atmosphere, and I mean, yeah, without spoiling too much, there was definitely some jump scares in this that it definitely made me jump, and I'm not trying to say like I'm super brave or anything, right? But for me, like even in scary movies and all, not that I don't get scared, it's just that I'm not like someone that like shit, screams, right? And all, when something jumps out on the screen, I just sort of like scream internally, right? Where I just sort of like take it in, where I just sort of like, ooh, that's just always been me. But I will say that this one probably did make me jump a few times, right? Much to my embarrassment. So but it's great. I love it for that. And yeah, great start to what would become this series would eventually get a few more games in it. And starting off with the first one though, definitely a great way to start off this franchise, and definitely one of the better multi-platform games of this year. It was on both systems. As far as I know, it ran pretty well on both systems there. So I don't think there was, because again, up at this point, a lot of the PlayStation 3 multi-plat games that were coming out, they were pretty much almost on par with the 360 for the most part. And as a matter of fact, some of them might have ran a little bit better on the PS3 with some of them. But yeah, this one, I believe it plays pretty good on both platforms. I think anyways. But either way though, great game, and yeah, a lot of fun to play. Oh man, I remember there was this one part in this game. I don't want to spoil where exactly, but I did not see it coming. And oh man, it gave me like goosebumps, like just thinking about it right afterwards, just how much it scared the crap out of me during that time. But yeah, great game. I love it for that. Let's see, but another cool multi-platform game, and I think this one was it published by Electronic Arts? I think so. But Mirror's Edge. Mirror's Edge is really original. I really enjoy the concept of this game. So what is it? What I liked about this game too also is, so one thing I haven't talked too much about, but a lot of the games during this generation were, because one thing, so I've mentioned before about like, we've already talked about like Western, games, dominating during this generation here. But one thing though, in the grand scope of games, right? Obviously not all of them and all, but when one thing that this generation was really known for was low frame rates, when we're talking about the negative things, right? So low frame rates, and also like this kind of like a brown and almost pea colored filter on games, right? And all this, a lot of the games look kind of with that color scheme there and all. But there was a few of them, though, that were not quite that. And this game here, Mirror's Edge, is very contrasted to that as far as like its overall color scheme and all. Because what Mirror's Edge is you play like some kind of a messenger, and it's a first-person game, and where a lot of it is you're doing some parkour over buildings and all, and the game's landscape and everything looks really incredible, where there's a lot of like bright whites and also reds, and also you can distinguish on some of the platforms you can hang on or jump on and all. And so the game looks really shiny, almost in a sense. Not shiny is maybe the word I want to use, but just really like, it's just really bright, I guess, but in a good way. And it's a lot of fun to play. It controls really well. And the game, when you're first playing it, if you've ever had a dream where you're being chased, right? And you're just running away and all, this game is about as close as you can get to that sensation there. Because, again, and the parkour's done really well, where the control scheme is done pretty good for a platformer in first person. I thought that they nailed the controls really well in that. And yeah, just a really great game. Has a really catchy song too, like a theme song too as well. And cool main character, and yeah, this is a great game. This is one game that I would definitely want to go back and beat at some point. I had a lot of fun with it, and yeah, it's good stuff. And it's just kind of a shame. I think it got some kind of like a updated version or a sequel. I don't know to what extent, but on the 8th generation. But this particular one though was a one that was considered to be really good. And I mean, like I think you do get a gun in it if I recall right, but a lot of it is just more melee and parkouring, and that's the main fun of it. So again, it's not necessarily a first-person shooter, but just more of a first-person game. If you've never heard anything about this game, check it out. Watch a trailer of it or something. And it's really a good game. I highly recommend this game, and very original as well too. So kudos to that for it. Yeah, great, good stuff. We also had Fallout 3, and I love this game. This is the main Fallout game that I've gone into, where I've really put a lot of time into it, beat the game, and just loved it a lot. Fallout 3, so this was now being done by Bethesda Studios. Did I say that right this time? And so kind of took sort of the same structure of like the Oblivion game, as far as like obviously different menu fonts and all that, right? But as far as like, where you push a button and you bring up a menu, you see your map, you can put waypoints on your map, how you equip items and things like that, right? And so kind of seemed to be sort of like that style, right, of like the menus. And then the adventuring also was very much the same, where you get this big open world, you get a bunch of side missions and all. And so the game I just really liked for its post-apocalyptic nuclear fallout setting. And it reminded me a lot of this movie that I like a lot called Cyborg that had Jean-Claude Van Damme back in the day. And yeah, I mean, cool game. I think where I really got into this game was, I was already liking it at first because of the setting and all. And I thought that the story was interesting where, you're growing up in this, underground bunker, and then your dad, voiced by Liam Neeson, he's guiding you along as you're growing up, as you're, start off as a baby literally, and then, you become a kid or a young adult. But then eventually, he ventures out, and so you're trying to track your dad down. I thought that was an interesting concept, right, to a story. But so I was liking the game already, but then I remember, part of the fun of these games where you're just exploring, and then I ended up in I don't know. I entered into something, and I was sort of like I was trying to do one quest, and I was going deep into like the subway area, I believe, right? And so it's all dark and really atmospheric and all. And I thought that was already cool. But then I meet like this group of people down there, and I don't know, were they vampires or were they some kind of a zombies or I don't know what, right? But then I ended up going into a different side mission. And I just thought it was all very kind of creepy, sort of really dark and atmospheric, and I was just getting so engrossed in it overall, right? With being in this really messed up version of this future, and something about it all just really clicked in me that I absolutely really enjoyed this game, and I played it for quite a long time, because I did quite a bit of side missions in it, and and all, and I'd love to go back and play this game just because it really left a lasting impression on me. I know that there's a particular other Fallout game that's considered to be better. I'll talk about that one, when its time is right. But for what it is, this one here, though, I really enjoyed it, and definitely became one of my favorite games of all time. And Fallout 3 is just, it's a great game. And I think I played this one on the PlayStation 3, and that one, for its time, right, on console, it ran pretty good. I would think maybe this one might run a little bit better on the Xbox 360, though I think I recalled that actually it was the opposite. Either way, I had a fun enough time on the PlayStation 3 version, but now there's, so many different versions of this game you can play now. But the game itself, really great, and definitely one of the better open world games for me, in my opinion. And yeah, truly a standout. And I think that the Bethesda formula, right, of what they did with Skyrim Oblivion really worked well with this universe here, right, with the Fallout. And Fallout is still a big thing. It's got its own TV show now, and yeah, I mean, Fallout became huge. And yeah, this one here, it's really the only Fallout game that I've played, all the way through. But I definitely love it, though, and definitely one of my more favorite games of this year. But for Call of Duty, though, so Call of Duty started becoming an annual thing. And so for this year, we had Call of Duty World at War. So this one, I believe, was done by Treyarch, as again, there were alternating developers during the stretch. So last year we had Modern Warfare, and with Infinity Ward, this year we had World at War, which I believe is Treyarch. And World at War, what it is, it's going back to like a World War II setting. But now it really put a more of an emphasis on story. And there, I mean, there's some pretty big name actors in this. The one I can remember was Gary Oldman. I believe he plays one of the characters in this. But yeah, I mean, you start off, I think, so this is, World War II. So I believe you're like in the South Pacific where you start off and then just go through various locales right and all throughout World War II. Overall, really good game. It's I would say it's not quite as memorable as like the Modern Warfare one, but I felt like it was an improvement over like Call of Duty 2 though, or 3. And yeah, I mean, cool game. I mean, it kind of felt like, oh, we're going back to World War II because at the time that setting was already starting to get a little overplayed, but it was still cool though. Good game, and again, the extra emphasis on story was pretty cool. And again, the multiplayer, I don't know for sure, but did this one introduce zombies? I don't know. Someone let me know maybe, but because I never played these games multiplayer. I just know that the zombies thing was kind of a big deal, and I want to say I think it started in this one. But again, when I'm talking about Call of Duty games going forward, right, because I'm probably not going to make much mention of the multiplayer. You'll have to forgive me for that. I don't know much about it, but I will talk about the single player campaign because I did love the Call of Duty single player campaigns for many years, and this one was not bad. I mean, it was definitely worth playing. It was like it's kind of like watching like a action blockbuster film, right? And so I enjoyed the games for that there. But probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, multi-platform game that came out this year was Grand Theft Auto 4. And so previously this series, at least for the past several years, had been exclusive to the PlayStation, but the Xbox 360 now got it. And according to what I read earlier, that version sold better, at least initially. And Grand Theft Auto 4, I mean, it's definitely a great game. Man, I remember when I played this game, I was really impressed with just like, because of the extra horsepower and all that you get with these with these consoles, of just how fleshed out the world felt now. It truly felt more lived in, where, the previous Grand Theft Auto games on the PlayStation 2 were great for what they were, and they were definitely really, big open world for its time and pretty detailed and all, but they still felt a little cartoony, where this one felt a little bit more real. The city looked more lived in, a little bit more gritty. And because this one goes back to Liberty City, which is inspired by New York City. And so you play as Nico Bellic, who's a great protagonist. So he's from somewhere from Eastern Europe, I believe, and he's voiced really well. I forgot the actor's name, but in this one here, they didn't really go so much for like big name actors, but the actors that do play these roles do them really well. And the story overall, I mean, it's really great. It's actually probably one of my more favorite Grand Theft Auto stories, and because it's a bit more real. More, I guess not. It's silly at times, right? Like, hey, Nico, let's go bowling, right? I mean, that's all funny and all, and but the story feels a little bit more grounded, a little bit more gritty, a little bit more mature, and I did appreciate it for that. I really liked Nico's background story and all, and so basically at the time when it came out in 2008. Because the Grand Theft Auto games before this had, like, Grand Theft Auto 3 was kind of more of a modern game where it took, it was inspired by like the modern settings at that time when it released in 2001. Vice City was, had an 80s setting. San Andreas had more of a West Coast gangster rap 90s sort of setting, where Grand Theft Auto 4 went back to being more like within the modern times, right? So like, for example, what's implemented into the gameplay is like a cell phone, as cell phones were starting to become a thing, right? Where you're getting texts and things like that. So that was kind of cool how they implemented that into the gameplay and the overall structure of the game. You're still stealing cars, you're still doing missions, but again, the stories felt a little bit more mature. Some of the missions that you got to do are really fun, and it's a pretty long game too. I remember I did beat it, but it took me a while to beat this game. And there's one particular mission I'll say that was really inspired by that bank robbery scene. If anybody's seen that movie Heat, which was awesome. That was a really cool mission, and probably one of my favorite missions in a Grand Theft Auto game. That was really cool. And yeah, great cast of characters. Nico, Roman, what's his name, Vlad, and the Packy, I think the Irish dude, and the Rastafari dude. I forgot a lot of their names, but just a great cast of characters all around. Again, voiced really well. Great soundtrack as usual. There was like this Eastern Europe like rap station, I think is what it is, that I remember I used to play a lot in it. I was like, I kind of like this. I was like, I don't know what they're saying, but I dig this. And just overall a great game. I used to love just exploring the city and just listening to the banter of the people, the noise of the city, and all, because it really made it feel like you're there. And I just remember being really impressed by that. And a few knocks on the game, though. The way Nico walks, it's a little weird. It's almost like he's swaying a little bit too much left to right, and almost like, I don't know. He kind of feels a little odd. And same thing with the cars as well too. They the controls on them, well, not bad. I feel like they felt a little too floaty like, but you know, in the grand scheme of things, not major complaints. Grand Theft Auto 4, it's really a great game, and when it comes to story wise and all, probably one of my more favorite Grand Theft Auto games. Not my favorite Grand Theft Auto game though, but I did like that they was a bit more mature and all, and the gunplay was a lot better now. The targeting is more improved. You can duck and cover now, kind of almost like Uncharted or in Gears of War games, and just overall a great game. And yeah, I mean, it was hugely popular at the time when it came out, but strangely, I feel like this game hasn't gotten a lot of love yet though afterwards. I mean, I remember being immensely popular, but it's like the Grand Theft Auto game that I feel like I don't hear talked about as much as compared to like the older ones, not including part 1 and 2, right? But like of the, starting from Grand Theft Auto 3 and up. Maybe I could be wrong on that. Like I said, I'm not involved like in a lot of video game community discords and all, so I don't know the full conversation of this game. That's just what it feels like. Like I feel like it doesn't get a whole lot of conversation behind it. And as far as I know, it's never been re-released, but if you have it on the Xbox 360, you can play it backwards compatible on the Xbox Series X, and it runs at 60 frames per second, so it looks really nice on there. And I don't think it ever got like an official patch. I think it's just brute forcing its way to 60 frames per second, and so it looks really nice there. So I would say that'd probably be one of the better ways to play it if you're a console player only. But yeah, Grand Theft Auto 4, great game, and let's go bowling. All right, but going to now exclusives, though, at least at the time that were available on these systems. So jumping over to the 360, we had Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. I don't know why I crack up when I see that name. But Banjo-Kazooie, so this was one of Rare's first games that came out on the Xbox 360 after Microsoft made that acquisition, on Rare. And I don't know much about this game. I just know that it's not really like a platformer like the ones on the Nintendo 64 were, but it's some kind of a customization game, or I'm not sure. I just remember that there seems to be fans of this game, but overall the reception of it was that it was a bit of a letdown, at least at the time, because it wasn't like a platformer game, right? Like we had on the Nintendo 64. So I think people were starting to realize that this acquisition that Microsoft did wasn't really going to maybe pay out that well. And maybe a hint of things to come. What I just talked about earlier with Xbox, right? But, oh, God, Xbox. But anyways, yeah, nuts and bolts. Oh, God, it's still early for me. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. But yeah, nuts and bolts, I guess, there's some fans of it from what it sounds like. But, but yeah, anyways, I'll move on. But another cool JRPG, though, that was exclusive to the 360 at this time, I'm pretty sure anyways, was Tales of Vesperia. So this is from the Tales series. And so again, the Microsoft Xbox 360 was trying to make some kind of noise in Japan. So it actually was a decent place to play some JRPGs during this stretch here. And Tales of Vesperia, this is probably the Tales game that I've gotten the most into. I haven't beaten it, but I'm quite far into it. I'm pretty sure I still have my save file. Maybe I should pick up on it and try to beat the game. I'm pretty quite far into it, and it's cool. I mean, the combat system is a lot of fun. It's got its cool little story to it, and the graphics are really nice looking with its cel-shaded graphics, and it's got a cool, colorful universe, which again was a nice contrast to a lot of the games that were coming out this year or during this generation. Because like I've said before, right, and a lot of the games that were coming out were just kind of like brownish and pea-colored, almost like military kind of games, which were cool and all, but it was just kind of nice to see like a colorful sort of game and all, which is again one thing that some Japanese games were still able to do during the stretch here. And so this was a cool game here. And I'm pretty sure the main character is voiced by Troy Baker. So, the acting overall, anime-like, but still pretty well done. And when I say anime-like, I haven't really kept up with anime for many years, but and I love anime. I love a lot of the stuff that has come out, and so because I kind of grew up on it as well too, I have probably a higher tolerance for like when I say anime style acting, and by that I mean is that they're trying to basically convert over like the style of speaking and humor and all from what's done in the Japanese anime, which probably works really well in their culture. But the way it translates over here, can seem a little cringe, a little silly. I'm going to have a higher tolerance for it just because, again, I love the stuff. I grew up with it and all. And so I appreciate it or, can, understand it, I guess, to an extent more. But for some other people, if you're not too familiar with it and all, or even if you are familiar, it might just seem completely cringe, right? And all, and you're just not into it. So that's why when I talk like this, when I reference things like anime style and all, just kind of know that I'm talking about that it was translated, that it was an anime to begin with and all. And I say that because like other things, like there's certain animes, I can't think of one off the top of my head, or certain video games that were translated or written and translated with the English speaking audience in mind. So if I'm using video games, for example, think the story and the writing of Final Fantasy X and the story and writing of Final Fantasy 12, right? Very stark difference, right? Where Final Fantasy X tends to be more anime-like, where Final Fantasy 12 tends to be more Shakespearean-like, if that makes any sense. But anyway, but okay, I'm getting way off track there. But yeah, Tales of Vesperia, if you like JRPGs in general with a cool, fun action combat system, this is definitely one that's, I believe is worth your time. But on a different kind of RPG game, so we had Fable 2 on the Xbox 360. So a sequel to the first Fable game, and I remember playing this game as I really enjoyed the first one. But this one here, I remember I bought it, and I played it, and I didn't quite get into it that much. I don't know, something about it just didn't really hook me that much on this game. Maybe it's one I should try to give another shot at some point, but it's kind of this more, in a sense, kind of more the same where you're controlling your character, making choices. I think you can, buy property, kill enemies. There's a good and bad morality system. I think you can get married in the game, have kids, I think. So it's a bit of a life simulator in a way. But I don't know, something about it. I remember back then that I just didn't quite get into it though as much as I did on the first one. But it seems to be pretty beloved though amongst fans. So take my opinion of it with, I guess don't take it too seriously, I guess, if you enjoyed the first one or you feel like you might like this kind of game. But it was one of the few Xbox 360 exclusives, though, that was available during the stretch here. But another Xbox exclusive, though, was Left 4 Dead. I've never played this game, so I don't know much about it, but I know it's really popular, where my understanding of it is that it's a multiplayer game where you're first-person shooter where you're taking out a horde of zombies. And from the people that have played it, they really seem to enjoy it. So if you're into that kind of thing, this would be a game to check out, although I don't know to what extent you can still play this game online, because it seems like it's where the game really shined. But yeah, that's about as much as I can say on it. Ninja Gaiden 2, though, was a really cool game. And so this was from, I forgot his name, but the developer, unfortunately, he passed fairly recently. But still, he's continuing on from his Ninja Gaiden game. So kind of the same sort of framework that he did with the first Ninja Gaiden game that came out on the Xbox. And so this one here, less adventure elements, but still keeps the cool and to an extent ramps up the action elements of this game, which was pretty cool. I don't quite like it as much as the first one, but it's still a really cool action game. And it's a kick-ass action game, actually. And excuse me, one of the things that made this game pretty badass was that just like when you're going through the levels and you're hacking and slashing away, like the level of gore in this game, like the body parts and everything that you leave around right and as you're killing your enemy was pretty intense, but gave the game a very brutal feel to it. And a lot of fun. Your character, Ryo Hayabusa, controls really well still. A lot of cool combos, a lot of cool weapons you can select on it. And, overall, pretty cool level designs. It's extremely hard. And this is one game where this in the first Ninja Gaiden game, before they introduced like the easy elements on it, are some of my better gaming achievements that I was able to beat these games back then. I will give a little bit of a warning on this game. I don't know, but because there was a new version that came out, the Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. I haven't quite played all the way through that game, but I know that at least on the original Xbox 360 game, I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint, okay? If you're not into spoilers, maybe fast forward like 30 seconds. But for Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, there's a particular boss somewhere towards the later part of the game. I'll just say he's like a big-ass turtle. Just be cautious after you beat him. All right. After it seems like you beat him. All right. And I'll just say that because that was very frustrating, right? Not paying attention to after I thought that I beat him. So just FYI. But either way, though, Ninja Gaiden 2, cool game. And yeah, definitely one of the cooler action games out there. The story is pretty cool for what it is, and all, but it's not anything too crazy, just, ninja action, anime style stuff. But I still got an enjoyment off of it. But if you're looking for just a cool action game in this generation, this is definitely one to play. Runs at 60 frames per second, or at least it targets that, but the one on the 360 did chug along at certain parts. But I believe if you play it backwards compatible on the 360, I believe it smooths out that frame rate pretty good, though, if I recall. But yeah, Ninja Gaiden 2, this version here that came out this year, really kick-ass action game. But my favorite game on the Xbox 360 and my favorite game overall of this year was Gears of War 2. So we're still taking the main characters here, Marcus Phoenix, Cole, Baird, and Dom, and in another kick-ass adventure. But it continues on from the same great gameplay as before. And now, I mean, there really wasn't much change from the actual core gameplay. It's just that now the overall level designs, the pacing of the game and all that feels really well done. I feel like they nailed all of that to perfection in this one here, which is probably why this one is still my favorite in the series. And I mean, at one point you're battling the Locust, in a downtown area, and in another part you're in these caverns and, riding on this very kind of rickety sort of little boat. And then in another area, you're inside a big worm, right? Trying to chop off its heart. So, I mean, just really, really incredible set pieces in this game. Some of the best shooting action in a video game of all time. And I just absolutely love the characters. All of those 4 characters and all along with some of the other side characters are really well done. And it's I just absolutely love this game. Looked really good for its time too, also, as it really improved the frame rate and the level of detail in the graphics were improved on. Also, still using the Unreal Engine 3, but everything just looks smoother. It feels a little bit better. So they probably now that they had a little bit more familiarity with the developing games on the 360, it just felt for like a smoother experience. And if you can play this game now on the backwards compatible through the Xbox 360 X or Xbox Series X, it runs at a smooth 60 frames per second now. And also, I mean, it holds up really well. And yeah, one of my favorite action games of all time. I really love this game. And it has some surprisingly dramatic moments, I'll say that much. Along with all the cool action and everything. The music was different. I really liked the music to the first one. I forgot who the composer was, but the first game had some really cool music that kind of felt like a cross between like Alan Silvestri's score from The Predator or James Horner's score from Aliens, kind of a combination of that, and I really liked it for that. This new soundtrack is still really well done, and actually it was done, I think, by the composer of the Transformers movies. Because I remember I used to geek out on a lot of that kind of stuff, like who did the music, who did the script, and who did the directing, who the producers are of like not only movies but also for video games. And so I remember I was always making connections like that, like, oh, this is a composer from Transformers movies, and that were that the first Transformer movies had come out in 2007, which was still pretty popular at that time. So anyways, I thought that was pretty cool. And yeah, Gears of War 2, I fucking love this game. It is so fun. I love these characters, and I kind of want to go back in there and chainsaw some locusts. But yeah, great game though. I absolutely love that game. But let's go over to the Wii now. And so the Wii had some exclusives here. Starting with Wario Land, the Shake Dimension. This one here, I'm just kind of actually checking it out real quick. Let me see. Okay, yeah. So this was a Wario Land game that was it was a 2D platformer, a hand-drawn 2D platformer, which wasn't really quite the norm during this generation if it wasn't an indie game. And I know it had an interesting mechanic where I believe you grab like a coin bag or an enemy and you shake the Wiimote and then it like shakes out a bunch of coins. I remember playing this game and I thought it was pretty fun. It's Wario Land games I feel like are some underappreciated Nintendo games because every one that I've played so far has really been fun. I really like Wario Land on the GameCube, that one that was developed by Treasure. But I do remember having some fun with this one here. And so I would say if you're wanting to play an interesting little 2D platformer from this generation, this one it's one of the more unique ones, I would say. So definitely give it a chance. You know, Wario, he's his ever adorable prick self. So, he's pretty fun to control. And yeah, the animation on it, I remember being pretty impressed with it. Oh yeah, definitely, I would recommend checking this game out. It was. I remember having some fun with this game. But we also had Super Smash Bros. Brawl. So this is a Super Smash Bros. Game on the Wii, as now this series was starting to take off and at least have one entry on the Nintendo consoles that it was coming out on. And I don't know much about this one. I haven't really messed around with it. I want to say, though, that I think that this is where they first introduced like a character like Snake in it. So kind of started setting the foundation for like some of the unexpected characters you can see in this fighting game roster that was would become eventually one of its main appeals, right, with the later entry. And from what I understand, the game plays pretty well. It's another Smash Bros. Game. I don't know much more about it other than that. I haven't really played this one, but I just know that, again, these series was huge and it was one of the top selling games of the year. So apparently people really liked it, right? But yeah, more Smash Bros. So I would definitely say, right, without having played it, I'm pretty sure you'd be comfortable with checking this game out on the Wii, right? And, having a good time with it. But another game that became a staple in pretty much any Nintendo console was Mario Kart Wii. And this one, too, I played it some, and it's fun. I mean, it's another Mario Kart game. I've said before several times, right? I'm more of a casual Mario Kart fan, so I love playing them, especially multiplayer. I'm just not familiar with like all the ins and outs of like what makes one good or one better than another version and all. And so for me personally, I like this one. I thought it's a well-played game. I mean, for sure. It's not a bad game by no means. I just felt that it didn't have a whole lot of originality behind it, I guess, where I kind of like the double dash, that you can play two characters, at the same time. But I mean, for what it is, it's a fun Mario Kart game. You'll get a lot of fun out of it for sure. And it came with a peripheral. Well, actually, I don't know if it came with the bundle or you had to buy it separate, but where it's like a wheel. So you put the Wiimote in the middle of this wheel-like thing, and you can use the wheel like a steering wheel, basically, right, to give you a bit of that immersion, right, that Nintendo was trying to go after with its controls back then. But I mean, it's a fun game, right? It's Mario Kart. You're going to have a fun time with it. If you're exploring the library of the Wii, pretty much a no-brainer, right? That this would be one to get. But one game that I wanted to touch base on a little bit, and well, if you can even call it a game, but it was Wii Fit. I wanted to touch base a little bit on Wii Fit just because it was, I think it's a bit of a personal story, but it's also one of the things I think that just made the Wii really successful during this generation, right? Because again, on how he was tapping into the casual audience. So a little story time here is, so let's see. I actually didn't get this game, I believe, until, no, maybe I did get it in 2008, but didn't really mess around with it until the later year. But it was because, it was in 2009 where I really got into it. And basically what was happening was at the time I was, not making the best life decisions and all. And so I wasn't exactly healthy during this time, I'll say. And I was really wanting to start working out to some extent. And, but I remember I had like this exercise bike that I would try to use, but just, I didn't really know anything about like lifting weights or anything like that. So when the Wii Fit came out, I thought, well, maybe this might be something that might get me to start exercising, right? Because it's a video game, and maybe it's something I can get into. And it seemed interesting, the concept, right? Because it came with like this balance board that supposedly like could read your movements and all, and track your weight, I believe, and and see how flex or well your balance was, or things like that, right? So I thought the concept of it was interesting. So I remember I bought the whole bundle, right, with the balance spoiler and all. And so then in 2009, I moved out from where I was living at the time, and I moved out on my own. And so when I moved out, I was in a period of my life where I was trying to make a lot of changes, and just my overall life, my overall attitude towards life, my I guess you can say like my career or what I was trying to do as far as for work and all, and also I was trying to get my health back on track. So I was trying to do a bunch of things all at once to try to improve myself. So at the time, I remember saying, I was like, okay, I need to start trying to get in shape. Because what happened was, when I moved out, I moved into an apartment that was on the second story, and when I was moving things up and down, right, into my apartment, I remember being really gassed out, right, from going up and down, right, like, putting it in my couch. I had the help from family, but even then, right, I was getting kind of gassed out, and so I remember telling myself, I was like, I really need to start getting in shape, and so I was like, well, I got this Wii Fit thing, let's try it out. And so I started using this, and I started using it for about a couple months or so. And I remember advancing in the game a bit, right, as far as like, where my balance was improving, at least according to the Wii Fit thing. And so little by little, what it ended up doing was that it laid the foundation for me that for a good stretch, I ended up actually really getting addicted to like fitness. And so, because what happened from there was that after a couple months of using the Wii, and according to the Wii Fit, it was telling me like, hey, you're doing really good. You're getting in better shape, where it ultimately gave me the confidence to go out running. Because then I remember I used to go on these long walks and runs and all. And then that was a bit of a wake up call though, because even though I thought I was doing really good on Wii Fit, once I actually started running, I was like, oh my God, I'm getting so gassed out after 5 minutes or so. But it's still, it because of the way you progress in Wii, and it tracks all your stats and everything, and you sort of like level up, so to speak, like in a video game. For some reason, that kind of clicked in my brain to say, it's okay if I'm not seeing immediate progress. You slowly are building up to a better version of yourself. And so eventually, where I was starting to walk around the block and then run around the block and then running for a little bit longer. And then eventually I found this like a hiking trail that I would go out for eventually these really long runs. And I was, going running further and further and further, when now I was running up to like an hour running, and I was, getting in really great shape. And eventually that led me to start lifting weights. And also for like a good stretch there for many years after I first got into the Wii Fit, I actually got in pretty decent shape, and eventually led me to the point where I was even pursuing a career in being a personal fitness trainer. That's another whole story of my own personal life that I'm not going to get into here and all. But basically, it gave me a lot of the tools that I needed, that I have the knowledge now and all, to how to take care of myself, how to be healthier and all. And I owe it a lot to this Wii Fit game. Again, I'm, kind of fell off the wagon here in the past several years, as I've just gotten older and kids and all, but I know how to get myself back on track. It's just more of a matter of motivation and finding the time and all that. But I have the tools set now, right, on how to get myself in shape. And it all started with this Wii Fit game. Because again, it got to the point where I ended up getting an NCSF and a NASM certification for personal fitness training, and as the years went on, and I always credit this the first couple of months when I played Wii Fit that got me into shape and kind of made me appreciate the slow but effective progress that you're making to ultimately, get in better shape and all. Because getting in shape, like especially if you're starting out from a point where you're, a bit overweight or you haven't really exercised for a while, it's a slow burn. All right. You have to be patient with it. You have to appreciate the little incremental progress that you're making it. And so meaning that it becomes a mind game, right? Because you're not seeing the immediate change in your body. So you have to be patient with it. And that's kind of what this Wii Fit really sort of like made me understand. I mean, when you know, if I were to go back to Wii Fit, I mean, it would look very, very basic. But I remember that I was starting from a very, very basic position that a lot of people might be starting in. And so I'm just kind of curious if anybody has like any stories about the Wii Fit that maybe helped you along on a fitness journey, right? I'd love to hear that kind of stuff because, again, not so much anymore, just because I don't really, you know, I'm a believer that, you know, if I'm going to teach something, you have to practice what you preach. And again, like I said, I've kind of fallen off of the wagon on that, but I am still actually a bit of a fitness geek. And so if anybody has any stories on that and all, oops, dropped my microphone. I would love to hear it, just because I'm always fascinated by those stories, and I'm just wondering like how many people Wii Fit or that played Wii Fit had a similar journey on that. And but anyways, just thought I'd share that there because I thought at the time it was very influential for me as far as like how much it helped me change my life on the stupid little Wii Fit game, right? And all with this little balancing board thing. But so now because of that, I do like using the personal trainer on, you know, Super Smash Bros. But yeah, it's that unlocks some core memories there. But yeah, it was interesting how video games, right, could do that. So see, video games can have a positive effect. But jumping over to the PlayStation 3 now, though, on some exclusives that came out on it during that time. So we had, so again, PlayStation 3 was really starting to come into its own now, right? It was starting to come out with some good exclusives, and that would only really step up, you know, in the years going forward, right? But it kind of started in this year. And so we had, like, for example, MotorStorm Pacific Rift. So this is a sequel to the first MotorStorm game that came out, I want to say, I think in 2007 or 6, I forgot. But it was now, instead of being in a canyon setting, now we're out in sort of a jungle kind of island setting. But it's a bit more varied, where you're not only like in the, you know, with the jungle setting and all with the palm trees and all, but now also where you're like in really high altitude areas or like in a volcano area. Excuse me. So it varies up the locales a lot. Still the great graphics engine that it's using. Really cool physics to it. Cool cars that you can use. The load time is a bit improved. Just overall, just a really fun experience, and just kind of better overall than what the first one was, which I really enjoyed that one. And so this, for that reason there, this game is actually one of my favorite PlayStation 3 games because it's just a really fun racer. I really wish they would re-release these games again on, you know, like bump it up to 60 frames per second and all that fun stuff. Because I feel like it's an incredible racing game series, and just one that feels like it's gotten lost in time now, as I felt it was one of the more stronger PlayStation 3 exclusives at the time. Great soundtrack, but, you know, kind of the same with the Xbox in the previous generation, because I don't think I've talked too much about it here in this generation. But so on the PlayStation 3 and on the Xbox 360, you can download music to your hard drive and then eventually play it on a lot of games that you were playing, right? So you can listen to your own music. And I remember I used to love doing that in this game here because it has a cool soundtrack to it. But I just remember I used to have like music that I used to like listening to, right? And all that I would play it along while playing this game. And yeah, just one of my favorite like games to play when you just want to get a rush. A lot of fun, great colorful graphics, cool controls, just an overall cool game. And also felt like a complete game, right? You know, we have a bunch of levels, a bunch of vehicles and all. As far as I know, I don't think any microtransactions in this game. Again, that wasn't quite a thing yet during the stretch here. So yeah, it felt like a complete racing game. And so I just missed that time, you know, where you would get a game, it was complete, right? Where, you know, anything that was there that you would unlock by gameplay, right? Not by having to shell out money. And so, yeah, just good time. But another interesting IP that the PlayStation 3 got during the stretch was Little Big Planet. I got kind of far into this game with its single player mode. I think I beat it actually. And I messed around a little bit with it in its, you know, creating my own levels or playing other people's levels. And it's a very unique experience. It's definitely, you know, wasn't really anything out there as far as I know at the time, at least on consoles. And so basically you play this cute little what is it called, burlap sack or whatever it's called, like a knitted character. I mean, it looks like something like your grandma would knit for you, the little Sackboy character. And it has a really charming aesthetic to it where it's like cardboard, like it looks like it's made all out of cardboard and all, and with yarn and all in it. So it's truly unique. It's much more of a slower paced game. Has a very calming feel to it. The platforming on it is pretty basic, but it's fun enough. And as you're collecting items in the single player mode, there are items that you can use to that you have access to use to generate your own levels in the user generated levels area. And so basically, yeah, you would in the multiplayer part of it, right, or in the online part of it, you would create your own levels with the tools that the game gave you, which was fairly user friendly, right, for its time, where it let you create somewhat complex levels. I mean, for people that were really skilled in this, they made some incredible stuff on this game. And you can play their levels or mess around with creating your own levels. And I remember I created 2 stupid little levels back in the day, but it was fun though. It was just a very calming experience, right? So I would play something like Motorstorm Pacific Rust. I'm like, yeah, testosterone, yeah, fuck yeah, no, like, let's go fast, and crash and hell yeah. Where now you're playing a game like Little Big Planet and everything's more calm, smooth, calm the soul and all. So it was a yin to my yang, right? And all, kind of game. And yeah, I remember it was a fun experience, and I thought it was truly unique. It was probably, if we're talking about like mascots, that's like more on the cutesy side of a character, I guess you can almost say like Sackboy was about as close as the PlayStation 3 got to a mascot for that style. But yeah, it was a unique experience. I mean, the online service have been shut down since. I would think that there's probably people out there that have brought it back to life, like fans. But officially, though, the service have been shut down, though. And so just wanted to think about, games online, right? And all that's the reality of it, is that the servers are going to shut down likely at some point. And that's what happened with this game here, unfortunately. So I don't know what happened to like a lot of the levels that people created, or would they just lost, and all. I don't know for sure on that. But at the time when it was released, it was highly unique, and I had some fun with this game, and definitely it was a memorable experience. It was definitely one of the more unique PlayStation 3 IPs. But we had Resistance 2 also, and so this is a first-person shooter, and it was a sequel to one of the PlayStation 3's probably the best PlayStation 3 launch game, Resistance: Fall of Man. So this one expands on that more, where now it definitely leans more into its sci-fi elements. I mean, the first one already had a lot of sci-fi elements. I mean, obviously you're dealing with like the Chimera aliens, but it still kind of felt a bit like a World War II shooter. Where this one, it feels more grand in scope. I mean, when you start off the game, you're right immediately, fighting alongside, where you're trying to take down this huge, like, mecha walking tank looking thing, which is incredible in scale. And I mean, this game has some really cool set pieces, and I was really floored by it, right? I'm talking like almost like God of War level stuff, only in a first person shooter. So I was blown away by it. I thought it was really cool. I love the setting. Again, you're still taking on these Chimera in an alternate universe where instead of Nazis, it was the Chimera, right, that took over the, Earth. And it's a lot of fun. Definitely one of my favorite first-person shooters of this generation. And I mean, Insomniac Games, it was a different style of game that they had done before, where, they had done like cutesy platformers before, where now there's like a, more mature shooting game. But cool weapons though on it, and just a lot of fun. I really appreciated this game. It's not a Halo killer, but it's great though. And actually, in a lot of ways, I kind of prefer it over the Halo games to some extent. In some ways, but yeah, just a great series. I don't know how well it sold for Sony. I guess maybe not too well. But this is another series that I really wish would get re-released, like of some kind of a remaster of some point. I mean, okay, fucking right now, what they did with Blue Point, right? There you go. You could have at least have them port over the Resistance games over, right? I mean, not, don't give it like a complete remake, and all, but just maybe clean up the games 60 frames per second, put it out on a package, for like, I don't know, $30-$40 or something. Boom, you got some money there, right? I mean, we already talked about Blue Point earlier, but yeah, Resistance though, cool series, and we would get a later one later on. I'll talk about that one in its time. But this one is my favorite one, though, of the series. Cool game. I mean, like I said, when you first boot up the game and you get into that opening area, I mean, you're just like, wow. It's the scope of like seeing that big ass tank. It's incredible. Cool game. The frame rate does kind of stutter some, right? And that's why I'm saying I think this game would really benefit from like a frame boost. But for what it is, cool game though. But we're going to end off, though, on Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. This game, let's see, did I talk about it before? I don't recall, but I want to say I think this game was first being shown as far back as 2005, I believe, as they were starting to show it on some of the E3 or one of those game show conventions, as the 7th generation was starting to get into full gear. Now, the trailer that they started showing of Metal Gear Solid 4 during that time looked really incredible. The final graphics weren't quite as good, but it still looks pretty impressive as far as like the character models and the overall textures and all that. One of the best in this generation, really. It suffers, though, from a low frame rate, though, at times, right? Because there's times where it's like, ooh, gosh, it's really chugging along, right, with its frame rate, which is why I'm really excited for this new updated version that's going to come out. Hopefully it can maintain a solid 60. No pun intended. But Metal Gear Solid 4, I mean, there was moments in this game where I was just truly stunned by what I was seeing, how the story was playing out. But I was also someone that was heavily invested in Metal Gear Solid 2, and Metal Gear Solid 3. So if you were like that, right? Or even nowadays, if you're finally finding out about the series and going through it, go through it in that order, right? 1, 2, and 3. Or I guess you can do 3, 1, and 2, right? And then if you wanted to play the old school ones, that's, I mean, the Metal Gear games, the 2D ones, that's up to you. But I would say at the very least, right? 1, 2, and 3. And then when you get into this game, if you're fully invested in the previous game stories, I think that's where you'll find a big appreciation for this game. Because I wouldn't play this game just on its own, right? Because this game is sort of like 1, 2, and 3 feel like they justified their own existence, right? Where they're definitely tied to an overall narrative, but as a game themselves, they're good games unto themselves, and they have a self-contained story, which is very much connected to the other ones, right? But their story and everything feels justified. Part 4 definitely feels like it was made for the fans, if that makes any sense. Because my understanding, I could be wrong, but I want to say that Hideo Kojima was kind of done with doing Metal Gear games, but either Konami or Sony paid him some money to continue on the series, right? Because Metal Gear Solid was a pretty popular franchise. Something to that effect. When Metal Gear Solid 4 was, again, when it was first being shown off, it looked like it was going to be the most incredible looking published game of all time because of all the ambition behind it, whether if it was graphics, gameplay, story, and all. I mean, the game looked really incredible when you were first seeing it in the first trailers, right? So finally, when the game came out, I mean, it's very ambitious as far as like the scope of what it's trying to do with its story. I mean, I think like I mean, the sense that I got was that Hideo Kojima was kind of done with doing this series, but they somehow, convinced him to come back to it. So he's like, all right, I'm just going to throw everything at the, in the kitchen sink at it. And so you get this story that is very crazy, very convoluted, very anime-like I've talked before on that, but still really cool though. And a bit cheesy also, but again, that's what I'm saying. If you want to be heavily invested into the overall Metal Gear Solid lore and all to really appreciate this game, because it definitely feels like a game made for the fans, right? Like it's like, okay, let's conclude everything, let's wrap everything up, let's throw everything at it, let's go, right? And so it's a lot. And so that's what I'm saying. If you go into this game not playing any of the other Metal Gear games, you're going to be completely lost. But I mean, there's so much to this game and all as far as the story goes and all, because again, there's very lengthy cutscenes. It's the gameplay segments are really fun. They're really well done, has some cool gameplay ideas, and it plays really well for what it is. It feels like, I mean, the ratio between cinemas and gameplay, it's definitely tipped more in the favor of storytelling and cinemas. So again, go into it knowing that as well too, right? Like you're playing a segment, okay, cool, this looks cool, and then after a few minutes, oh, okay, I gotta watch another cutscene. And now again, the cutscenes are all really well directed. Again, if you're fully invested in the story, it's really cool and all that, but it feels a little jarring, right? Where you're playing a game for a few minutes and then, oh, okay, another cutscene, right? So you have to get kind of used to that, and you have to want that if you're going into this, right? So almost kind of think of it like you're watching a movie with some gameplay in it, basically. But but the overall ambition of this game and all is truly incredible. I mean, there's some amazing moments in this game, I feel, right? Yeah, I mean, like I said, after I played this game, I was like, this is the coolest experience of a video game I've ever played. And then after that, I was like, yeah, maybe not so much. But still, I mean, that was the impression that it left on me at first. And, this journey here, because this is the final story in the Metal Gear Solid saga as far as like in the timeline goes. And just kind of like with like something like the Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, or some other games I can think of. Well, I won't go into those games later because those come at later years. But basically, it felt like a nice conclusion to a very long story. And when I definitely mean long, I mean the ending itself. I think it clocks in at almost like about an hour and a half or so, almost like the length of a full length movie. So, like I'm saying, you're going to be watching a lot of stuff here, right? But if you were invested in the first 3 games and you really love them, then yeah, I feel like you owe it to yourself to play this game, just because it's a lot, but it's really cool. Bit cheesy, but still cool. I remember that one of the things that really sold me on this game at first was, after like the reviews and all came out, and and I finally bought the game, and you install the game, because the installation of the game takes a while. No, actually, no, wait, let me go back. When you first put in the disc into the PlayStation 3. So on the PlayStation 3, when you put in a disc, and then you on the crossbar menu, when you select, when you just not actually like push a button to select it, right, to go into the game, but just when you have the where you're at in the crossbar, where you're at the game, after you put the disc in, a lot of games on the PlayStation 3 will have like a background, or it has like a little video segment playing of the game, and maybe has a little bit of music and all. On Guns of the Patriots, it has like this quick little video loop where it's just showing like Snake kind of hiding behind the box, I believe, and there's Ocelot in the background. And again, it's just a little video that it shows in that little square box. And then it has the wallpaper of like Snake, who he looks like he's in pain. He's kind of looking up, almost like he's like, and then the song that's playing, which is from Harry Gregory Williamson, I believe that's the composer's name, and it has this song, the Guns of the Patriots, the really like, and it's just kind of looping, right? It's like a 5-10 second loop of the video and the music, where it's of the most intense part of that song, where it's like don don do 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 don don do 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 do. It's a horrible rendition of it, but it just sounds really cool, and it's really loud, and it just like give you like this feeling like, what kind of a crazy story and action am I going to get into this game? And I remember every time I see that little segment there, it gets me really pumped up just to play the game, right? It is so cool. And I will just say that the 2 moments where that song, Guns of the Patriots, comes out in this game, so fucking cool. And I mean, the way it's directed, again, the usage of the song and all, just some cool. Oh man, I'm geeking out over this. Some of the coolest like directed action moments in a video game. Admittedly, you're not really playing it, but you're looking at it. And I mean, definitely shows that, Hideo Kojima, my understanding of Hideo Kojima, he's a bit of a prick, right? It seems like he's been a bit difficult to work with some actors and all, and he seems to have like this fetish for like celebrity talent, like actual Hollywood celebrity talent, which is kind of weird. But I will say though that the man knows how to direct stuff and direct cool action, and and like I'll just leave it at that, right? The 2 scenes where that main song, Guns of the Patriots, comes out in this game, one is towards the middle of the game, and the other one is towards the end. Very cool. Crank up the volume if you can, and just get ready for a good time. It's very cool stuff. But I'm excited to play the remake or the remaster of this game. I want to see this game at 60 frames per second. I want to see it with 4K or 4K-ish graphics. I'm going to start playing the Metal Gear Solid games. I'm getting myself pumped up on this. I need to go through the Metal Gear Solid games. Snake and Otacon and all you guys, it's time to go back on another mission. We got to do this. But yeah, Guns of the Patriots. At the time, it was my favorite game of the year. As years have gone on, like I said, I dropped it down some in my overall ranking, where Gears of War 2 is now my game of the year this year. But some games just leave a lasting impression on you for one reason or the other. And sometimes, granted, it was in that moment, in that time, where it was really special, but Metal Gear Solid 4 at that time, in that moment, was truly breathtaking. You know what was cool about it too also was sometimes this has happened a few times in my life where I'm a movie nut as well too, right? So I'm a geek on a few things, right? So I already talked about it. I'm a bit of a fitness geek. Obviously, I'm a video game geek, and I'm doing this stupid little podcast here. And then also I'm a big movie geek. Well, 2008 was a really cool stretch because it's going to sound dumb, but like in 1997, we had Final Fantasy VII, and then we had Titanic that came out a few months after that, and so that was just an amazing time for me. Yes, I'm a big fan of Titanic. I love that movie. 2008, we had Metal Gear Solid 4 that came out, and then a few months afterwards, I think, is when The Dark Knight came out, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And so I was just like geek overload during that stretch there, right? I'm like, Metal Gear Solid 4 and The Dark Knight, holy shit. It was a good time to be a geek, basically, long story short. But yeah, great times. Good year overall. But okay, that's what I got here for 2008. I think I'm going to end it there. I've been blabbing on now for a bit. And then when I combine my overall things that I've recorded on the past couple days too, also for this overall podcast I'm doing here, this is going to be probably a little bit of a lengthy one. So I'll end it here. Hope you have an amazing week, and we will see you next week where we go into 2009. And for me, 2009, me personally, it's a really great year because I'll just say this. Take what I said about 2007 as far as being one of the greatest years in video games, right? But for me, I think I prefer 2009 because a lot of the stuff that came out in 2007 were improved upon in 2009, meaning that we got a lot of cool sequels in this year. So that'll be fun to talk about here as I talk about 2009 in next week's podcast. So hopefully I'll have this uploaded again next Sunday. And so until then, hope you have an amazing week and see you in the next one.